All right. Welcome everybody to another exciting episode of the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. I am the host and moderator of the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup, Cypher here, and we're going to get right into the news because we have a little treat for y'all. We're going to be on the Conversations podcast with Tiberius D tonight, and that happens in about an hour. So we're going to do an hour of the news roundup, go over to his channel, do some conversation stuff, and come back and wrap up the news roundup. So got a lot of content for you tonight. So let's go ahead and just jump right into it. All right, so Welcome, everybody. So, as you know, we do a couple other podcasts on this show. We do Cipher State, which is foreign affairs, foreign policy focused podcast. We do Crowdsourced Politics Proper, which covers a variety of political and social commentary topics. And we also do Praxis Run, which is a podcast dedicated to finding out how people put put theory into action, otherwise known as praxis. So you can go ahead and check those out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast at. So we're going to jump right into it with more updates about war in Ukraine. So Russia's war against Ukraine has nearly reached the 6-month mark. We begin tonight's news roundup with updates from the past week. Now, from reporting from The Guardian, Russia has suspended an arrangement that allows U.S. and Russian inspectors to visit each other's nuclear weapon sites under the 2010 New START Treaty, in a fresh blow to arms control. Ukraine reported intense shelling across the front lines Tuesday as both sides traded blame for the weekend strikes on the nuclear complex that triggered international concern about a potential atomic disaster. According to the UK Ministry of Defense, Russia's assault towards the town of Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine has been its most successful axis in the Donbas region in the past month. Despite this, though, it has only gained about 10 kilometers in that time, while elsewhere in the Donbas region, it has gained only 3 kilometers over 30 days. Quote, almost certainly significantly less than planned. Now, 2 more grain-carrying ships have actually sailed from Ukraine's port as part of the deal to unblock Ukrainian sea exports. The Ocean Lion, which departed for South Korea, is carrying 64,720 tons of corn, it said, while the Rumiri Yaka is carrying roughly 5,300 tons of sunflower meal to Istanbul. 4 ships that left Ukraine earlier are anchored near Istanbul, according to the Turkish Defense Ministry. The first grain-carrying ship to depart Ukraine ports after the UN-brokered deal is looking for another port to unload its cargo after the initial Lebanese buyer refused delivery due to its 5-month delay, according to Reuters. Now, Belarus, where Russian troops were positioned to hold joint exercises before they invaded Ukraine from the north in February, announced it will hold live-fire military training exercises both in Belarus and in Russia this month. It is highly likely Russia is deploying anti-personnel mines to protect and deter freedom of movement along its defensive lines in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region, according to the UK Ministry of Defense. In additional news, Ukraine has destroyed Russian warplanes in Crimea. Now, after the explosions tore through a Russian airbase in Crimea on Tuesday, Russia's defense ministry quickly played down the extent of the damage, saying an accidental munitions blast had left no casualties and that no equipment had been destroyed. However, videos from the scene and an assessment by local officials who declared a state of emergency told a very different story, with at least 1 person killed, more than a dozen wounded, and hundreds moved into shelters. More than 60 apartment buildings were damaged, along with 20 stores and other buildings, officials had said. And on the grounds of the base, after huge plumes of smoke cleared, the remains of a warplane could be seen apparently melted into the tarmac. Satellite imagery showed craters, burn marks, and at least 8 destroyed fighter jets as well. The images, one taken hours before the explosion and one taken days, did not show the haphazard debris of a single blast, but rather what appeared to be 3 large craters from detonations. The imagery showed at least 8 destroyed warplanes, both Su-30s and Su-24 fighter jets, all parked on the airbase's tarmac. These before and after photos from the BBC will turn to now. Hold on a second. What the heck? There we go. So as you can see on the screen, you should be able to see. All right, let's roll in. So this is the August 9th before the explosion. Really tidy, looks pretty clear. You can see vegetation, all that stuff. And then bam, the day after, it's just completely wiped out. There was massive explosions taking out vegetation, as you can see here. These are all burn marks. Like you can tell, like how many blasts had happened here. Crater, damage, etc. So Russia's trying to maintain its propaganda war both abroad and at home. But these images coming from various different sources, satellite images that are mostly open to the public, basically blow their narrative completely out of the water. Continuing on, though, Ukraine is now shaping the war, according to ISW. So let's talk about that. Ukraine is actively shaping Russian President Vladimir Putin's war, quote, for the first time since it began nearly 6 months ago, a US-based think tank said in an assessment released today. The Institute for the Study of War, otherwise known as ISW, said that Russian troops are responding to counteroffensive efforts by Ukraine in the currently occupied southern Kherson region by ramping up the relocation of its personnel and military equipment to Kherson and the western oblasts. Russian forces are also redeploying military equipment, artillery, and aviation in particular to the annexed Crimea region from elsewhere in Ukraine. Experts noted that Russian forces, when prioritizing the capture of Lukhansk, an area in Ukraine's eastern Donbas region in May, withdrew or suspended offensive operations in the city of Kharkiv and the southern axis. Quote, Ukraine's preparations for the counteroffensive in Kherson and the initial operations in that counteroffensive combined with the dramatic weakening of Russian forces generally appear to be allowing Ukraine to begin actively shaping the course of the war for the first time, the ISW report said. In further news coming out of Ukraine, there has been a successful prisoner exchange. So Russia confirmed Thursday for the first time that negotiations between Washington and Moscow on a prisoner exchange are underway after U.S. proposed a deal in order to release WNBA star Brittany Griner and another American prisoner, Paul Whelan. The Russian Foreign Ministry said talks are underway via a channel set up by President Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin when they met in Geneva in June last year. The Biden administration has been under pressure to secure Griner's release after her arrest in Moscow's airport in February. She was carrying, supposedly, 2 vape cartridges with cannabis oil containing less than a gram of the substance, which is banned in Russia. Griner asked the court for leniency, but was sentenced last Thursday to 9.5 years in prison. Her lawyers have announced plans to appeal. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken took the unusual step of revealing publicly last month that the U.S. in June made a substantial proposal to get Griner and Whelan home. He didn't elaborate, but according to the Associated Press and other news agencies, the reports have said that he's offering Viktor Bount, a Russian arms dealer. Bount is serving a 25-year sentence in the U.S. and once earned the nickname the Merchant of Death. And there's been a movie called Lord of War starring Nicolas Cage about him as well. Now, after Lavrov's comment, Blinken said that the Russians have indicated that they are prepared to exchange through channels we've established for such a purpose and will be pursuing that. Now, ex-Marine Whelan, 52, a security consultant arrested in 2018 and convicted of spying in 2020, is serving a 16-year prison sentence. He says that he was framed. He was not included in an exchange agreement in April in which another ex-Marine, Trevor Reed, was swapped for a convicted Russian drug trafficker. And that concludes our coverage of the efforts in Ukraine. Now, if you're just now joining us, welcome. This is the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. We do this every Thursday at roughly 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news that was of the last week with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. We also do other podcasts, as we said at the top of the show. That includes Praxis Run, which is a podcast dedicated to understanding how people put theory into action, otherwise known as Praxis. And we'll be interviewing more people in the coming months and getting a broader spectrum of political operatives and theorists to round out the kind of show that we're actually trying to do. Our first guest was a community member that is an education activist from the left in Georgia, while our second interview was a pro-life activist / YouTube commenter that wanted to explore that after the appeal of Roe v. Wade. So if those are things that you're interested in or wanting to know more about, check them out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And if you know anybody or you would yourself like to participate in this, go ahead and reach out to us on Twitter, which you can find us at crowdsourcedpoll. Now, let's continue on with the thing that has blew up the news for the last 48 hours. And that, my friends, that is the raid on Mar-a-Lago. Mar-a-Lago, lots of news to cover there. So let's go ahead and talk about it and understand what is happening there. All right. Maybe it isn't me, but before we go into that, we do have a comment from the chat, which I didn't have up. So according to maybe it isn't me, quote, sucks for her, yet it is on her. And before they release her, current track, before they release her, they need to let every prisoner out of prison in the U.S. who has ever been busted for weed. Now, I don't agree with that, man. The issue here is that we can't even actually believe that she was carrying the stuff. She admitted to it, but she admitted to it under duress, because in Russia, if you don't admit to the crime, you're going to be found guilty. It doesn't matter what the fuck it was. And if you don't admit to it, they throw the book at you, so to speak. It's similar to plea deals in the United States. And it was a CBD pen, I think. So it wasn't like anything super outrageous here. So yeah, I don't agree with that. But let's go ahead and continue on with the cast and get into the Mar-a-Lago stuff. So let's talk about it. Unless you've been living under a rock or in total news blackout, you already know that Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort was searched by a team of FBI agents on Monday. There's been a lot of speculation and misinformation, so we're going to dive into what's currently known about what led up to the search and what it appears to be about. So the FBI search at Mar-a-Lago comes months after federal investigators served an earlier grand jury subpoena and took away sensitive national security documents from Trump's property during a June meeting, people familiar with the matter told CNN. Former President Trump received a subpoena this spring in search of documents that federal investigators believed he had failed to turn over earlier this year. The existence of the subpoena helps to flesh out the sequence of events and lead the search of Trump's home on Monday by FBI agents seeking classified materials they believed might be still there. Now, the subpoena suggests that the Justice Department tried methods short of a search warrant to account for the materials before the politically explosive step of sending FBI agents unannounced to Mar-a-Lago. Two people briefed on the classified documents that investigators believed remained at Mar-a-Lago indicated that they were so sensitive in nature and related to national security that the Justice Department was forced to act. The search was prompted, in part, because officials had developed evidence, including from at least one witness, that there were potentially classified documents still remaining at the Palm Beach property. As you might remember, in January, the National Archives arranged for the retrieval of 15 boxes of documents that included classified information in January of this year. After that retrieval, authorities believed that the documents remaining at Mar-a-Lago had national security implications. In early June, 4 investigators visited the resort seeking more information about potentially classified materials from Trump's time in the White House that had been removed when he left office. The investigators, including Jay Barrett, the chief of the counterintelligence and export control section of the Justice Department, sat down with 2 Trump's attorneys, Bob and Eva Cochran, according to a source present for the meeting. In the June meeting, investigators were shown where documents were held in a basement room at Trump's residence. It was found that the boxes seized in January containing some of the materials that were part of the NSA's Special Access Program, SAP, a classification that includes protocols to significantly limit who would have access to that information. The discovery of SAP materials has not been previously reported. That discovery led to FBI interviews with aides, then to a grand jury subpoena, and then to this week's court-authorized search and seizure of said documents. It is not clear yet what precise materials that subpoena sought or what documents the former president might have provided in response. The discovery of the SAP materials has not been... sorry, that's been already said. In addition to the grand jury subpoena for documents, federal investigators separately served a subpoena for surveillance video at Mar-a-Lago, seeking to gather information about who had access to the areas where the documents may have been stored. A few days after that visit, Mr. Barrett's team, Mr. Cochran, a few days after that visit, Mr. Barrett emailed Mr. Cochran and told him to further secure the remaining documents, which were kept in the storage area with a stronger padlock, one of the people had said. Then they subpoenaed surveillance footage from the club, which could have given officials a glimpse of who was coming in and out of that storage area, according to a person with knowledge of the matter. The received footage, specifically from the areas of the club where they believed the documents might have been stored, also was according to that source. Now, the Justice Department has asked a court to unseal that search warrant that the FBI received before searching the Florida estate. Trump himself issued a press release regarding the search this past Monday. Since then, he and his lawyers have sought to present their interactions with the Justice Department prosecutors as cooperative, claiming that the search came as a shock. It should be mentioned that Trump himself made it a felony to mishandle classified documents in 2018 as part of his "we need to get Hillary Clinton away from everything." So that's a bit of the information, and it's kind of funny that Trump is getting hoisted by his own petard, so to speak. But there's still more. So the call came from inside the circle. That's what we're going to call this little segment. So earlier this spring, federal investigators began interviewing members of Trump's staff at Mar-a-Lago and former White House officials who were involved in moving documents from the West Wing to his Palm Beach residence at the end of his presidency. During that same period, investigators were in contact with a number of Trump's aides who had some knowledge of how he stored and moved documents around the White House and who still worked for him. Two senior government officials told Newsweek that one individual guided authorities to documents at Mar-a-Lago and that the raid was set to occur when Trump was out of town to avoid a galvanizing photo op. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal, they also corroborated those claims, speaking with anonymous sources who said the information they knew, the location of these documents, and that Trump stored many more at Mar-a-Lago than the 15 boxes in February. Less than 2 months later, about 24 FBI agents intentionally not wearing the blue windbreaker emblazoned with the agency's logo, usually worn during searches, appeared at Mar-a-Lago with a warrant. The club was closed. Mr. Trump was not present. The FBI startled a crew fixing a large fountain, a maid who was dusting, and a handful of Secret Service agents who guarded the complex. The search warrant was broad, allowing the agents to investigate all areas of the club where classified materials may have been stored. They went through the basement, Mr. Trump's office, and at least part of the residence at the club itself. After hours of searching, they left with several boxes. The person said that the FBI left behind a 2-page manifest of what was taken. Sources close to Trump told Rolling Stone he is now so paranoid he's worried about being wiretapped and trying to root out the quote-unquote FBI rat. Quote, "He has asked me and others, do you think our phones were tapped?" one source told Rolling Stone. Continuing on, given the sheer volume of investigations going on into the former president, I do not think he's assuming anything outside the realm of possibilities. So, again, if you're paranoid, which it seems that Trump is, he's going to start trying to figure out who was the mole. Was it the usual suspects? Was it his own son? Who knows? It could have been anybody. But that is kind of interesting things that we're just talking about and thinking about over here. I'm telling you. Now, one of the things that also has been clear from all this that's been going on, all the news reporting and everything like that, is that Trump has tried and to a degree successfully controlled the narrative, at least for a certain segment of the population. And this is something that I said on Twitter. You need to tell your side of the story first. You need to tell your side of the story first about whatever it is. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. Because the first person that first reveals anything that's going on in a like he said she said situation or what have you, right, is going to be more likely to be believed because the response from the other party is going to be looking like they're trying to defend themselves and shirk blame. Doesn't matter what it is. This could be anything from like, you know, stealing cookies from the cookie jar to as much as like trying to lie to the FBI. Like, it doesn't matter. If you don't get your side of the story out first, you're going to be less likely to believe. And if you fail to do that, which the FBI and the Department of Justice did fail at, they didn't do any like grand announcement like while it was happening, right? They could have done that. They could have gotten their side of the story first, but they wanted to avoid looking political here, making it look more political because Trump controlled the narrative at first. Then you have the only way that you can actively change the narrative and get people back on your side is to what I would call flood the zone. Give all the information that you can as quickly as you can and repeat it as often as you can. And with that, it seems like the Department of Justice, specifically Merrick Garland, is trying to do that. So we're going to go ahead and turn over to that now. So Merrick Garland had response to the flood of attacks and misinformation coming from Trump and his allies, made a statement today. Let's go ahead and turn over to that.
Afternoon. Since I became Attorney General, I have made clear the Department of Justice will speak through its court filings.
Hold on a second. Let me turn this up because I know it's kind of low for y'all. One second. Camera. Move this up a bit too. All right, that should be louder.
Afternoon. Since I became Attorney General, I have made clear the Department of Justice will speak through its court filings and its work. Just now, Justice Department has filed a motion in the Southern District of Florida to unseal a search warrant and property receipt relating to a court-approved search that the FBI conducted earlier this week.
So this is one of those situations where, like I said, they're going to release as much information as they can about the nature of the search and seizure. And so Garland has moved fairly quickly, although maybe he should have did this beforehand, I don't know, but fairly quickly into getting the process started and finished to release the grand jury indictment. Let's continue listening now.
That search was of premises located in Florida belonging to the former president. The department did not make any public statements on the day of the search. The former president publicly confirmed the search that evening, as is his right. Copies of both the warrant and the FBI property receipt were provided on the day of the search to the former president's counsel, who was on site during the search. The search warrant was authorized by a federal court upon the required finding of probable cause.
So this is the reason that he is being clear about this particular action and the fact that it came from the court is to ensure that the checks and balances on the system are being known and being followed. That way that people can, I mean, you know, Trump followers are going to believe what they're going to believe, right? They're the devout of the devout are going to not believe anything he said, but it's about everybody else. And by saying like, hey, we're following the process, this was pretty routine, like he failed to, you know, provide all the information that we asked for him, grand jury indicted him, that shows that this process has been followed and it has been not political.
The property receipt is a document that federal law requires law enforcement agents to leave with the property owner. The department filed the motion to make public the warrant and receipt in light of the former president's public confirmation of the search, the surrounding circumstances, and the substantial public interest in this matter.
In other words, we crossed our T's, dotted our I's. You ain't got nothing on us.
Faithful adherence to the rule of law is the bedrock principle of the Justice Department and of our democracy. Upholding the rule of law means applying the law evenly, without fear or favor. Under my watch, that is precisely what the Justice Department is doing. All Americans are entitled to the even-handed application of the law, due process of the law, and to the presumption of innocence. Much of our work is by necessity conducted out of the public eye. We do that to protect the constitutional rights of all Americans and to protect the integrity of our investigations. Federal law, long-standing department rules, and our ethical obligations prevent me from providing further details as to the basis of the search at this time.
In other words, don't want to bias anything, bias potential jurors, yada, yada, yada. But we're going to release as much as we can because we have to.
There are, however, certain points I want you to know. First, I personally approved the decision to seek a search warrant in this matter.
Now that's important. So this means that it went to the highest level for approval that you can go to in the Department of Justice, right? And while you can say that Garland is a political appointee, he's supposed to be non-political. And by going all the way up the chain, it means that every single sort of look, second look, third look, fourth look, or whatever, over the subpoena, over the warrant was made. And so that he himself is taking it upon himself to say that the buck stops here and I approve this because it was necessary.
Second, the department does not take such a decision lightly. Where possible, it is standard practice to seek less intrusive means as an alternative to a search and to narrowly scope any search that is undertaken.
So the reason that he's saying this is because Trump has balked at every single request coming from the Department of Justice, the National Archives, judges, everything. He's basically said, nope, not doing it, not providing information, not doing it, not following you, I don't need to, whatever, right? And because they were left with no other alternative to follow the law, they had to go and raid his residence, his estate. Which, duh, like if you have been under grand jury indictment and under court orders to provide information by law, you are required to do that. And if you fail to do that, then by law, the Department of Justice in this case, or your state, whatever level of government we're talking about, is authorized to get a warrant to get those documents, those items, whatever it is. Even to subpoena you to testify in court doesn't mean you can't plead the fifth, which we all know Trump was going to plead the fifth. He's going to do it, right? But that means that the Department of Justice is following procedure and the law.
Third, let me address recent unfounded attacks on the professionalism of the FBI and Justice Department agents and prosecutors.
This is his "how dare you" moment.
I will not stand by silently when their integrity is unfairly attacked. Men and women of the FBI and the Justice Department are dedicated, patriotic public servants. Every day, they protect the American people from violent crime, terrorism, and other threats to their safety while safeguarding our civil rights. They do so
at least safeguarding civil rights now. At least safeguarding the civil rights while a Democrat is in charge.
Great personal sacrifice and risk to themselves. I am honored to work alongside them. This is all I can say right now. More information will be made available in the appropriate way and at the appropriate time. Thank you.
General, the former president said this
FBI agents?
Thank you all for your questions. As I said, all I can say.
So that's important to end on there. So what? Oh, no. No, are you serious, Nikki? Hold up. Hold up. Hold up. We're going to have to read a news article directly 20 minutes ago while we were streaming. According to the Washington Post. Thanks, Nikki, for pointing this out. Let me throw this on the screen real quick. Breaking news from Nikki. Thanks, Nikki, producer. Appreciate you. The FBI is looking for nuclear documents. That's huge. That's ginormous. We're going to go ahead and, before we get into the attacks and everything like that, and the defund the FBI, we'll get into this really quick, because this is extremely, extremely important. All right. So let's go ahead and turn back over to this. Oof. All right. Breaking as of 20 minutes ago from the Washington Post. Classified documents relating to nuclear weapons were among the items FBI agents sought in a search of former President Donald Trump's Florida residence on Monday, according to people familiar with the investigation. Experts in classified information said that the unusual search underscores deep concern among government officials about the type of information they thought could be located at Trump's Mar-a-Lago club and potentially in danger of falling into the wrong hands. The people who described some of these materials that agents were seeking spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss an ongoing investigation. They did not offer additional details about what type of information the agents were seeking, including whether it involved weapons belonging to the United States or some other nation. Nor did they say if such documents were recovered as part of the search. A Trump spokesman did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The Justice Department and FBI also failed to comment. Well, let's read that again. The people who described some of the material that agents were seeking spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss ongoing investigations. They did not offer additional details about the type of information the agents were seeking, including whether it involved weapons belonging to the United States or some other nation. So this is, yeah. So let's continue on. Now, Attorney General Merrick Garland said he could not discuss the investigation on Thursday, but in an unusual public statement at the Justice Department, he announced he had personally authorized the decision to seek other court permissions for a search warrant, yada, 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 which we just listened to. Let's see. Materials about nuclear weapons is especially sensitive and usually restricted to a small number of government officials, experts said. Publicizing details about U.S. weapons could provide an intelligence roadmap to adversaries seeking to build ways of countering those systems, and other countries might view exposing their nuclear secrets as a threat, experts said. But wait, did this... service, yada yada yada. Improper handling documents. Former senior intelligence. The former officials said signal. Person familiar with the investigation. 15 boxes. Mar-a-Lago. The former official. Trump team. Yeah, we know all this. This is all recap stuff. Okay. So wait. Classified German people familiar. Okay. Nuclear weapons. Okay. So, okay, that confused me a bit. So I get it now. So we'll go ahead and go back to this, the main screen here. So basically what is breaking here is that the people familiar with the investigation had said that they are looking for documents pertaining to nuclear weapons. However, they are unsure whether those documents relate to the United States or another nation that has nuclear weapons. Now, this part is huge because we all know that China intelligence operatives have already tried to infiltrate Mar-a-Lago through buying access, which, by the way, it's for a foreign adversary, it's very cheap to buy access to get to Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago. It's $10,000. And with that $10,000, we're actually going to go over to that real quick. Let's see here. Let me pull that up because it's funny. I found it. So people might know I attended a Trump Freedom Rally tour thingy a few months back, and I get their emails still. And their emails have all kinds of stuff. And this is important to what we're talking about because it's pretty good. So, with congressional membership, you too, yes, you too, for $10,000 can get 2 congressional seats at an American Freedom Tour event, 1 seat at a private roundtable discussion with top influencers, 2 photo ops with one of our headline speakers, American Freedom Club weekly newsletter, American Freedom Club monthly impact call, American Freedom Tour commemorative coin, advance notice of all Freedom Tour American events, and American Freedom Tour Club membership card. Now, why do I bring that up? Because in the thing that I just read off, it came from the Trump people. The American Freedom Tour, the LLC designed, the nonprofit designated as an LLC designated to blink Trump supporters out of a ton of money. And when I say a ton of money, I mean they're selling classes that go for like $40,000 a class. All right. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to have on this show investigative reporting on that. All right. But that includes private things with Trump and access to Mar-a-Lago. So that's important to know. So just for the low price of 10,000 smackers, you too can get access to all the Trump secrets that Trump keeps. So it's very cheap. And China has already been caught trying to infiltrate his circle. And I'm sure there's other foreign adversaries there as well. That's why it's important. Now, continuing on though, with other important breaking news, as we said, Republicans are now claiming that the FBI and the DOJ have been weaponized, and it is time, my friends, it is time to defund the FBI. They even have merch. Marjorie Taylor Greene, where's her defund the FBI merch? Oh, come on. Ah, yes. Already on Zazzle. Already on Etsy. Yeah, it's everywhere. Marjorie Taylor Greene has capitalized on it. It's going all over social media. D'Souza is saying it and saying this is the Gestapo. Everybody is saying that it's time. Everybody on right-wing media is saying it is time for Americans to take up arms and defend themselves and their grand avatar of their Zeitgeist, of their bigotry, Donald Trump from Dark Brandon. And with that, pretty much as soon as Trump announced that he was being raided by the FBI, an FBI field office and officer were attacked. So, let's talk about it. In what was surely the result of outrageous threats of violence that has run on right-wing media outlets all week, which I just discussed, a man who planned to attack the FBI lost his life in Cincinnati today. Today, my friend. Lost it today. And so we're going to go over with that, and I somehow managed to lose the chat here. All right. So, reporting from the New York Times as of today states, after a lengthy standoff, police officers shot and killed an armed man accused of trying to break into the FBI's Cincinnati offices on Thursday, officials in Ohio said. But the motive of the man remains largely unclear, but we'll get into that. Investigators are looking into whether the man has ties to extremist groups, including one that participated in the January 6th attack on the Capitol, according to 2 law enforcement officials familiar with the matter. The attacks in Cincinnati came a day after the FBI director told reporters that online threats against federal law enforcement were deplorable and dangerous, telling congressional members of Congress, members of the Republican Party, elected officials, that they need to cut it out. The man, who officials said was wearing body armor, tried to break the entrance Sorry, excuse me. The man, who officials said was wearing body armor, tried to breach the entrance to the visitor screening facility outside the FBI Cincinnati field office in the suburb of Kenwood around 9 a.m., said Tom Lindgren, an agency spokesman. He said an alarm was set off and agents responded. The chase eventually left the interstate and snaked around rural roads before coming to a stop near an Interstate 71 overpass close to the city of Wilmington, Ohio. Lieutenant Dennis said gunfire was exchanged. Roads were blocked off for several hours, but had reopened by the late afternoon. Lieutenant Dennis said law enforcement officers attempted to negotiate with the suspect during the hours-long standoff, and then tried to take him into custody with less than lethal tactics. Those efforts failed, he said, and officers fatally shot him after he raised his gun. Now, this was FBI. This was FBI offices attacked by a Trump supporter. Full stop. That's what happened, right? And according to the New York Times article we just essentially read, the motives were unclear. However, we have some tweets we need to go through. So let's go ahead and go over to that now. Make sure you can see this. All right, zoom in a bit. So the New York Times has identified the Ohio shooter suspect as Ricky Sheriff. There is a Truth Social account using the same name. On the same day the FBI executed a warrant on Mar-a-Lago, the account made a call to be ready for combat and kill the FBI on site. Zoom in. I hate that. There. Zoom in. People, this is it. I hope a call to arms comes from someone better qualified, but if not, this is your call to arms from me. Leave work tomorrow as soon as possible, as soon as the gun shop, Army, Navy store, pawn shops open. Get whatever you need to get ready for combat. We must not tolerate this one. They have been conditioning us to accept tyranny and think we are do anything for the last 2 years. The time we must respond with force. If you know of any protest or attacks, please post here. Are you proposing terrorism? Very important question. No, I am proposing war. Yes, he's proposing terrorism. Like this, the motives are fucking obvious, right? Be really ready to kill the enemy. And by enemy, he means you and me. Anybody that isn't a right winger. It's essentially, he's calling out the FBI directly, but that's not where it stops. Okay? That's not where it stops. That's not where this rhetoric stops. The GOP right now are calling pretty much any Democrat and any liberal an enemy of the United States. And with that kind of rhetoric, this is the actions that we can expect to happen. Because what do you do with an evil person when the law fails? And that's the idea these people have. That is what these people think is happening. They're thinking that the law has failed, it is being turned against them, and that there's no way out. Well, some deranged lunatic that's hyped up on conspiracy theories posted by people like fucking D'Souza, Prager, Maya, who's another big one? Fucking Posbeck, right? Jackson Sozak. Members of Congress are going to think that they need to take the law into their own hands. This is after decades of saying that the Second Amendment solution is necessary. I am not one to promote this whole Civil War narrative. I'm not fucking Tim Pool, okay? I mean that in both senses. I hate the man, all right? I think he's a grifter. This is dead fucking serious shit. This is the kind of rhetoric that cannot be tolerated. And if we had a better system of government, the members of Congress promoting this fucking rhetoric would be censured and stripped of their post. Because it is raising the stakes to the point of possibly enraging lunatics. Turning people against fellow Americans based on this grand conspiracy narrative that is just outright bullshit. He's basically calling for political violence, and political violence is terrorism. Now, there's more to be said about this, so we're going to continue on. Well, I thought I had a way through bulletproof glass, and I didn't. If you don't hear from me, it is true. I tried attacking the FBI, and it'll all mean either I was taken off the internet, the FBI got me, or they sent the regular cops while I was trying. He's being told by people to not engage in this stuff, having trouble getting information, but Viva Fee said Patriots are heading to Palm Beach, where Mar-a-Lago is. I recommend going, and being Florida, I think the feds won't break it up. If they do, kill them. This is the kind of groundwork that this rhetoric creates. It won't matter if we don't get violent. We see the courts and are unfair and unconstitutional. All that is left is force. So that's the kind of stuff that's being promoted across right-wing media right now. Okay. And it is the natural consequence of setting up a group of people to believe that there is nothing left for them other than to take up arms and defend the country they love. And it's dangerous. And anybody engaged in it, I don't care who they are, I don't care what political side they belong to, they need to stop that. But it's especially bad when politicians, elected leaders, because they're leaders, engage in this level of rhetoric, and it should not be tolerated. Comment coming in from Nikki Adams here says, quote, "It's January 6th, chapter 2. Yes, it is. And with that, we need to go over to the recent Trump ad that was pulled up that I saw. Trump response FBI ad. An ad. Where's that ad? I had it. I need the ad. It's like, didn't have it saved. I thought. Trump releases ad. Here it is. I think I got it. Best is yet to come. Yeah, this is it. Trump releases new campaign style video. We're gonna go ahead and watch this. All right. Once this ad clears up on my end, it's not good, folks. And the ad is not good to make. It is a good ad. That makes sense. Like from a marketing perspective. It's not stopping. And as some people have said, some people have told me, some conservatives have told me, that the FBI raid has galvanized Republicans around Trump again. I don't know how much that is true. But it is something to think about. Alright. Oh, come on. Come on, I want you to replay the...
Failing nation.
Alright.
We are a nation in decline. We are a failing nation.
And this ad, just to be clear, this was released right after he said he was raided. So they were building this. They knew this was going to happen. They knew it was going to happen. And they had this ad ready for maximum impact.
We are a nation that has the highest inflation in over 40 years. Where the stock market just finished the worst first half of a year in more than 5 decades. We We're a nation that has the highest energy cost in its history, and we are no longer energy independent or energy dominant, which we were just 2 short years ago.
Should be noted, inflation's going down, actually. We'll talk about it
We
later.
are a nation that is begging Venezuela and Saudi Arabia for oil.
Good.
We are a nation that surrendered in Afghanistan, leaving behind dead soldiers, American citizens, and $85 billion worth of the finest military equipment in the world.
Now, should be noted, one, Trump had that plan. He was going to go through with it if he won re-election. Two, yeah, that happened. And it's effective to bring it up.
We are a nation that allowed Russia to devastate a country, Ukraine, killing hundreds of thousands of people, and it will only get worse.
Meanwhile, Trump is saying that we shouldn't Trump allies are saying we shouldn't get involved in Russia or involved in that and give Ukraine any money or anything like that. So he's doing a freaking 180 on this.
We're a nation that has weaponized its law enforcement against the opposing political party like never before. We've never
Like I said, they had this ready.
seen anything like this. We're a nation that no longer has a free and fair press. Fake news is about all you get. We are a nation where free speech is no longer allowed, where crime is
Yeah, whatever here, buddy.
rampant like never before, where the economy has been collapsing, where more people died of COVID in 2021 than in 2020.
Okay, Delta, like, how is that anybody's fault? What the fuck?
We're a nation that is allowing
I take that back. It's partly your people's fault for saying to people to not get vaccinated. So, take that up with your own party, dipshit.
Iran to build a massive nuclear weapon, and China to use the trillions and trillions of dollars it's taken from the United States to build a military to rival our own.
Some of that money you gave them.
We are a nation that over the past 2 years is no longer respected or listened to all around the world. And we are a nation that is hostile to liberty and freedom and faith.
Oh,
we
yeah.
are a nation whose economy
To be clear, this is like another 4 minutes of this.
is floundering, whose stores are not stocked, whose deliveries are not coming, and whose educational system is ranked at the bottom of every list.
Nikki, are you referring to the fact that this might be a Jan 6 tent?
We are a nation that in many ways has become a joke. But soon we will have greatness again. It was hard-working patriots like you who built this country, and it is hard-working patriots like you who are going to save our country. There is no mountain we cannot climb. There is no summit we cannot reach. There is no challenge we cannot meet. There is no victory we cannot have. We will not bend. We will not break. We
Oh no.
will not yield. Ever, ever, ever. We will never give in. We will never give up. And we will never, ever back down. We will never let you down. As long as we are confident and united, the tyrants we are fighting do not stand even a little chance. Because we are Americans, and Americans kneel to God and God alone. And it is time to start talking about greatness for our country again.
And of course, Guilfoyle gets the best is yet to come, right? So they had that ad ready. Yeah, and you'll never let me down if you do those things, right? Yes. So they had that ad ready, 100% ready for the Trump. And so they knew that by refusing to honor those subpoenas, they were going to get raided. That's 100%. Like, they knew it. This ad was ready. This ad is very well produced. That's probably one of the best political ads I've seen in a long time. I mean, it's mostly bullshit, but that's not the point. The point is to be effective is to use effective rhetoric. Hold on a second. to use effective rhetoric in order to convince people that are already almost there that you're correct. And the imagery, fantastic. The cadence, very good for persuasion. And it really, really, really sucks. Really sucks that the liberals and lefties don't engage in this kind of superb messaging. That a lot of liberals and leftists want to rely on the fact that they are correct to convince people that they are right. But that's not how people operate. It's all vibes, man. It's all vibes. People vote on how they feel, and if something feels true, it is. That's how you win political messaging. So if you think that ad isn't going to be effective, you're wrong. 100%, full stop, absolutely wrong. So we need people to combat these kind of narratives. And if you're a Democrat, liberal, leftist, or whatever, you need to get your politicians on board doing that. Because you can't rely on the fact that you're correct to be right. And that's how I'm going to end that segment. So, what can you do? Well, this is the call to action, everybody. If you have news you want to see us cover on the News Roundup here tonight, or if you'd like to join one of our many panels, here's how you can reach out to us. First, go ahead and join the Discord. Discord's where we're trying to build up a good community, and it's where we'll be holding contests. Yes, I've been saying that for a while, but I looked at our finances. We have some money, so we're going to have a contest. And I got to talk to some people about the exact contest and the time frame and the way we're going to do it. But we are going to have a contest, and it will be probably around predictions of how the House is going to go. That's what it's likely going to be about. So go ahead and join Discord for that. You can also reach out to me on Twitter at crowdsourcedpoll, and that's where I like to post memes and wherever the hell I feel like, within or less. We also do run a Facebook group. You can get to us there from Facebook/groups/the Commons, Tribune Commons, and yeah, those are the ways that you can reach out. Hey, thanks for the follow. Now, we said at the top of the program that we would be having another show tonight. We're going to interrupt now to get prepared for that other show. That show should be starting here in a minute or so. But it is going to be a conversation with, hopefully, Nate Dallin and Tiberius D of the Mask Off podcast, talking about things that have been happening in the news, specifically around probably the economy. So we're going to talk about that. It's going to be a fun little conversation. We're going to break up the news roundup. Once that is over, we're going to finish the news roundup, and then I'll splice them together and put it up on YouTube. So let's go ahead and get started with that, and I will be right back. So I'll be right back. Just getting set up, everybody. We'll be back shortly.
I'm getting set up as well.
All right, everybody. I'm going to get set up now. Getting set up, getting set back up. Sorry about that. Sorry for the ads. So had to reinstall Better Discord as well. You don't know what Better Discord is? Get it. It's fucking amazing. There we go. Oh no. Oh no. No, 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 no. Why? Themes. Edit. Crap. My God. Background. Or background cover. Where is it? What the fuck? Why did my green screen go away? Word. Well, okay. That sucks. May you have to close out Discord again? It's sorry everybody. Still getting set up. I apologize. What's up? Thank you. So
Anyone heard from Sam today?
he said he wasn't gonna be able to make it.
Oh, I'm sorry, I must have missed that.
Yeah.
Well, that's unfortunate.
Wait,
but,
Alex Jones was in Omaha today? What the freak was he doing in Omaha?
Maybe trying to swindle people out of their money after he's lost $40 million or $50 million.
He's got plenty. That's not going to bankrupt him.
That's unfortunate.
I was actually NPR had a funny thing this morning about all the January 6th people who are in jail all have podcasts and are making tons of money now.
Yeah.
Really?
Turns out January 6th was like the best thing that's ever happened to them. Lovely. I love it. Our situation is so good right now, guys. We're so good.
So get a felony and then get a podcast. Great.
Yep. All right. Apparently, I need to fix my Discord. So we're not going to have a green screen today, y'all. Sucks.
That's horrible.
Yeah. Where's the podcast? Oh, hiss. That's fine. We're just gonna have a fancy red background for us.
Okay, so I guess I can pop this one off. Some people have been waiting, and it's already been 10 minutes since we were supposed to start, so yeah. And I keep forgetting Sam isn't going to be here. Is he okay, or does he just got shit to do?
He just said he wouldn't be able to make it. He didn't say why.
Oh. Okay. It's better. We'll do that. All right, in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to The Conversation, aka The Nerd Show, where we get together and chat with some of the smartest people I know. We're going to be changing up a little bit. We've been wanting to bring Cypher in for quite a while to this show because he gives it a particular perspective that I think balances it out, but also in the regard that he was on vacation, and now that he is back, we have been able to bring him in fully, and hopefully he'll be pretty regular on this one.
I thought we brought him on because his hair brought a sex appeal to the program that was sorely lacking before he was here. I thought
can you
really
stop giving away all of our secrets, please? I would really appreciate it.
No, seems right.
It is. It's correct. It's fine.
Right. So anyway, he is a computer science analyst for a company that I cannot disclose, but it is good to see our good friend Cypher here, kicking ass and taking names as he usually does. And it is a pleasure, and you can always catch him out on the CSP News Roundup, usually right before the show starts. Next, he is an immigration lawyer out of Omaha, Nebraska. You know him, you love him. It's Nate Dowling is in the house. How you doing, Nate?
Good, doing real good.
All right, and we're going to be doing some nerd shit again today. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember I was just like, wow, it's so nerdy. Even I don't know much about it. All right. So, Nate, as usual, you can take the lead on this. Let me know if I need to pull up a screen show or anything. Hopefully the family treats you well. But
I was about to say, I'm getting knocks. This is bizarro. Here, give me 1 second. We're going to talk about today are 3 things. We're going to talk about the economy. We're going to talk about the Fed, and we're going to talk about if the Democrats' fortunes have turned, and they're in a much better position now than they were even just 2 weeks ago. But I want to talk about that. But give me 1 second.
My green screen's fucking with me. I don't know what happened.
Yeah. Cypher, while we're waiting on him, how was the roundup?
Roundup is good. Got to cover all the Trumpian stuff. So that was good. We're gonna finish it up after this conversation, so we're gonna be streaming for a pretty long time tonight. But yeah, and then I'll splice them together, and they'll be both on YouTube. But we're gonna be streaming. We're doing some streaming.
Gotcha.
I don't know why this isn't working. I don't know what's going on. Hello? Yeah, it's coming through the solo too. What the hell happened?
Muted. I'm back, and now
I
I'm
know what it
unmuted. Okay. So I got to go back. Disinflation and the comeback. It feels good to be a Democrat, but will last than the Fed's next moves. That's what I recommended we talk about today. And I think if we go more or less in that order, we're going to be pretty happy. So disinflation and the Democratic comeback. Okay. So the Republican talking points have been very specific, and they've been, frankly, kind of on point, right? That there's been an inflation problem. And it looks pretty clear that inflation peaked around mid-June. At least oil prices certainly did. And then some of the other commodities started to come down mid-June. And now the data has finally caught up with what we were seeing on the ground already, which is inflation was, in fact, transitory. And I know that brings a lot of sad tears to a lot of eyes. But I think that this was, we've been talking about this on this show for quite some time, that this was the direction of things, and that is not a huge surprise. I just want to know, especially from Cypher's perspective, what did you see, like, let's say in June, that started to let you think personally that this inflation train was going to start to slow down and possibly even reverse?
So the same thing that KOE saw in March, that thought he was going to go into a recession. Like,
So, like,
a little dig in.
Yeah, so our friend Phil KOE, you think that as soon as you saw oil prices flatten, you thought now they're going to reverse, and then that's really the whole game, right?
So it was that, but it was also the core CPI. Core always trends before general inflation, from my understanding. And so when core CPI started to decrease, it was like, okay, cool, like that's a wrap. We're gonna see inflation. Now, I didn't know the exact time frame that this was gonna happen. I told people, like, when before Russia invaded Ukraine, I was telling people May, June, maybe. I think I had like maybe April in there. And then when Putin invaded, I'm like, okay, food prices are gonna go up, like all this stuff's gonna happen. Let's push that out like 3 or 4 months. And so I started telling people probably July, because the Fed also reacted. And so everything was kind of just coming up in that direction, more or less. And yeah, it turns out that I was more or less correct, or at least one data point does not a trend make, but it's good news. So
yeah. So do you think then, what do you think the big driver of the drawdown in inflation is? Do you think we just got supply up? Do you think the Fed really did start to crush demand? Like, what's your thinking on this?
So it's going to be dependent on the commodity you're looking at, or the thing you're looking at. So I have a person in my chat saying, like, gas and airfare are down, inflation gone. He's being tongue in cheek here, but rent, electricity, food, everything else is going up, right? So what that tells me is, like, what we saw essentially is that after the Fed reacted, you had everything that you would expect to happen from that. You had home builders to start to slow down. You started seeing inventory of homes already start to build up, and it was crushing the ability for people to get mortgages, essentially, and cool down the housing demand. On the back end of that, the sanctions on Russia, ironically, I think, are actually helping with the overall picture when it comes to oil prices, because they are cutting so into the pricing that they're selling that they could have been getting, and they're just pumping out so much more oil to make up for that huge price cut that they're offering. It's like 25-30% or so, that it's actually putting downward pressure on demand from India and China, the two fastest growing economies in the world. One of the two, I think they are the two fastest, but Nigeria is not too far behind. And so since they're buying up that oil, that's relieving pressure on the rest of the world to be able to buy oil from other markets. And Saudi Arabia is in that too, and so they're just undercutting. They're not undercutting themselves, but that's allowing them to sell more oil to the rest of the world. And so just all these kind of factors came together, and we saw some decrease. And as energy goes, so goes the rest of everything else, because everything's energy related.
So so really you think that the big key here is the supply of oil goes up, and as a consequence of supply going up, and that's the real base of all of the economy, right? And so as long as that commodity starts to head in the opposite direction of up, so the prices start to go down, everything else will slowly follow. Do you think that there are certain sectors that I don't even know how to phrase it. You just think that may not go down, right? Like, are there some sectors that, like, oh yeah, we're just going to have some persistent high prices, probably not due to anything that's happened over the last 2 years. It was just going to happen.
Oh, well, I wouldn't say anything that happened, because, so to partly answer your question, I think that we're not going to see inventories return to the used car market and the main car market. And specifically because chip manufacturing, while it's being helped by both chip acts, because there's two of them, that's not going to bring chip manufacturing online for 2 or 3 years, more likely in the United States. It's going to take that much time to build, like, the factories out and everything like that, even though Samsung started building other factories and stuff like that. And so there you have that aspect of it. And so I think you're going to still see sticky prices on that, and that's going to elevate inflation to a little bit of degree. I mean, the cars are selling 30% over MSRP. People can't find a decently priced truck for under $45,000 right now. No, I don't see that going away. I think that's going to stay sticky for a bit. I also do fear that food prices are going to be a little elevated because the war in Ukraine started right when the growing season would start, and it's going to continue on. And while a lot of not all the Tiberius, you're gonna have to correct me on this if I'm wrong though, but my understanding is that not all the farmland is in the east of Ukraine. So there's actually some towards where the fighting is not happening, so they can actually harvest what has been planted, but that's going to be a lower output than normal, 20-30% lower output at minimum than what would normally happen. And we have droughts in the United States, so I don't think food prices are going to come down as much. I do think the pace of inflation will slow on food prices, but I don't see any deflation happening for food, at least not in the near term.
Giving a bit of a strategic overview into what he was saying is that actually, believe it or not, the majority of the Russian wheat belt is not in the east; it's actually in the west. I'm sorry, not the Russian wheat belt, the Ukrainian wheat belt. The problem is the eastern half is actually a little bit more arid. It's actually a part of the greater Eurasian steppe. And so while you do have quite a bit of agriculture here, is that if you're actually talking about the far more beneficial soil, but also the beneficial growing patterns, it's actually everything west of the Dnieper River. So these are places that haven't really been a combat zone that have been active. Here's the issue. Through most of the Ukrainian infrastructure, particularly through the center of the country, which some of these areas have been combat areas, some of them are not, is that you take everything, you put it on a truck or you put it on a train and you send it to one of the local infrastructure sites on the Dnieper River, and then you float it out. Problem. Everything from Zaporozhye all the way down to Kherson is now occupied by the Russians on at least one of the banks, if not both. So that avenue is shut down. Now, a lot of people are talking about Odessa, and there's two reasons for that. There is a major offloading facility in Odessa, but there's an issue here. My good friend Peter Zion likes to talk about how Odessa is important for wheat infrastructure and pretty much grain infrastructure in Ukraine. He's not wrong, but the actual Dnieper and its power to but basically to extend into the wider world doesn't come from Odessa. It comes from Kherson, which is actively occupied by the Russians right now. So the long and the short of what I'm trying to say is this. The best avenue that the Ukrainians have to export to the wider world has been shut down. And I don't trust the Russians to honor their agreement to keep it open. So I don't think most of that's going to happen. Odessa is reduced in capacity. The Russians have actually targeted it as basically as a strategic target. They haven't destroyed the port by any measure, but they've definitely done some damage. And when you combine the river and Odessa itself together, is that there's probably the better part of anywhere between 40 to 60% of the Ukrainian wheat crop, but just more the crop, not being able to get out. We don't know the definitive numbers on here, but we keep hearing some really good numbers out of Ukraine, and I'm just super skeptical. Now, I don't think it's as bad as Zion is letting on to. I think he's completely overgoing board here. This is one of the things I actually really disagree with him on, is that I think he's being overly too pessimistic. Everything that we have seen from the Ukrainians has actually been more on the positive end and definitely away from what he's been saying. And more particularly when it comes to that is that while the Ukrainian war is devastating and quite horrible, is that literally the places that the Russians have occupied overall have been not very agricultural zones, or the least populated agricultural zones. What the Russians have actually occupied, and I'm not saying this is actually a correlation here, is most of the mining areas, the places where you get metal ores, you get coal, you get even some of the natural gas reservoirs that are within Ukraine are in the areas where the Russians have largely occupied. I don't think that's on purpose in the regards that they're going specifically for that. I think it's largely due to the fact that the Russians have only really had success out of Crimea, and everything else has just been bogged down. They haven't even taken over all of Luhansk and Donetsk yet. And it's been, 6 months now since this war almost kicked off? Yeah, so that I'll give a sit rep on that at some point here soon. I know I need to, and a lot of people are asking me about the Chinese economy, because it looks like, I'm going to say it again, we might be in the final 12 months of China. It's looking horrific over there, and no one's talking about it. And I'm not memeing when I say that. There is some really shady shit going on right now. But anyway, to wrap this all up, at least for the Ukrainian segment, is that the concern isn't American food. The concern isn't even European food. Most of the Ukrainian grains do not go into Europe. It goes to the Middle East. And figuratively, the last time the Russians shut down, we had Arab Spring. Now you've got the Ukrainians at a reduced supply. You got the Russians basically boycotted. And you have the Indians trying to play ball, but also hampering down on their exports along with the Chinese. We could absolutely see this, or I don't even think it'll be this year. I think it'll just really kind of set in at the beginning of next year, is that we're going to see the most unstable political situation that we've seen in the Middle East in probably the last 100 years. And that's actually what concerns me more than anything geopolitically right now, is that even with the protractors saying things are better than what we expected, and people saying things are far worse than what we expected, every piece of data that I'm looking at says that the Middle East is going to catch on fire next year.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, let's think about this. Since we want to be all doomer, like it just took Ty like 3 minutes. We basically had just nothing but good news, and then Ty was like, "Yeah, but genocide in the Middle East," and it's like, "Oh, well, lovely." So if we're gonna be all doomer, I was gonna wait till a little bit later on this, but
we can still wait.
Yeah, okay, let's still wait. Let's focus on if you're a Democrat, you should be feeling real good right now, right?
No,
I think.
No?
Isn't this a good time to be a Democrat?
No.
I want to hear why, Tiberius? Why isn't it a good time to be a Democrat? I'm a Democrat. Okay. I'm happy. Like, come on, tell me why it should be doom and gloom, bro.
Okay, so number one is that while I totally get legislatively, it looks like the Democrats are probably going to pull it out at the 11th hour.
Big facts.
Okay, so the issue here is that so it's cleared the Senate from everything that I've seen. Right, this is a $375 billion bill, right?
Yeah. Based.
And then I don't see any reason why it's not going to clear the House. The president will obviously sign it. Number one is that no one's going to really feel anything about this until next year, right? So
True.
even if you can say, hey, we got the legislative win, this applies to one of the most toxic parts of the Democratic Party apparatus, and that is the environmentalists. Don't get me wrong. I consider myself a green in some respects. But I'm a green that can do fucking math. And the problem with a lot of these programs is I don't think they help a lot of people, except for the people who are neck deep in these industries, who are solar and wind and whatnot. Basically, what I'm saying is this. Two things. One, when it comes to the average voting population, I don't think this is a piece of legislation that really matters to a lot of people. Number two, even if it did, I don't think they're going to see any kind of positive repercussions from this until next year, because usually that's when it goes into effect anyway. So I think it was way too little, way too late. And the Democrats are still going to bleed out the fucking nose. On the other hand, does the economic numbers look a little better? I would actually argue no. I think I'm serious. I'm looking at the economic numbers that I'm seeing, and it's like, hey, inflation's going down finally. It's great. Yeah, it is. But it looks like we're in stagflation, and it doesn't look like we're leaving. Is that we're going to see negative economic growth for the better part of this year, and I don't think that's going to reverse. If it does, it'll probably be fourth quarter, because you're going to see a lot of inventory drop. But if it is, that will be it. I do not expect good economic numbers for the rest of the year as far as economic growth. I think that is why we're seeing the stagflation numbers actually get better, is that inflation's going down because people are literally just running out of time and energy to spend extra on all this shit, particularly when it came to fuel, particularly when it came to food. But go ahead and push back on that if you desire.
Sure, I'll push back a little bit on it, just a tad. So, from some of the economic numbers that I've looked at, real spending actually increased. What was it, May and June still? Right? In July, I think there was virtually no change from June. I might be wrong about that, but looks like Nate's telling me I'm correct. So that accounts for inflation. So that means that people, I think what we're seeing happen is the going back to whatever the fuck normal actually is in the modern economy. And part of that means spending down on the huge amount of savings people built up through the pandemic, and going back to credit card spending. But that doesn't mean people are unable to meet their needs, at least broadly speaking. Not saying it doesn't suck. It sucks. Inflation's terrible. Get it. I'm not meaning to try to downplay inflation whatsoever, so don't come at me. I understand, okay? Just because I'm privileged enough to not have to worry about what my food budget is because it's just me and my wife doesn't mean other people don't have to worry about theirs. So I get it. All right. With that said, because of the job numbers, 500,000 beating expectations by like what, nearly 50%. The real spending going up, inflation coming down, core CPI falling for the last 3 or 4 months. We're seeing that decrease in inflation. We're seeing rapid decrease in gas prices, and that's because of the Chinese economy, like Tiberius alluded to, falling fast because of the fuckery that's going on there. I think, you know, it's morning in America again, guys. We're back. We're back. We're not in Carter territory. We're in Trump being like, we're in Trump being like the last 2 years of Carter and Biden being the first 2 years of fucking Reagan. We got massive spending bills coming up that it's going to June up the economy. We got actual taxes being increased. So that's going to tamp down on inflation. We have actual material impact of the drug prices. Huge win. That's a huge fucking win. People do not understand this, right? People do not understand that Medicare is the price maker for drugs. Everybody is going to experience a decrease in drug prices with the drug prices that Medicare is going to negotiate down, because because they buy so much, they control so much of the market, quote unquote, so much of the market with their purchasing, that it is going to have a deep and recognizable impact for millions of people to rely on drugs. And that impact is going to be felt within the next year. It's going to be felt. You're going to see it in the stock price portfolios of any major pharmaceutical, and you're going to see that happen very quick. It's gonna start tapering off, because what is pharmaceutical industry going to want to do? They're going to want to look like they're playing ball in order to avoid any fallout from trying to fight it too much. So they're going to probably like give some concessions and be like, hey, don't negotiate too hard. But we know what people Biden's appointed. Biden, being the moderate liberals, pointed to some pretty progressive people to his administration. So I don't know, like, those are going to be pretty quick happening, and gas prices are just going to continue to fall down. Like they've gone down another week. So like that's how behind inflation numbers are. Like gas prices fell, what was it, 30 cents prior to July's numbers coming out, and then July's numbers come out and it fell another 20 cents. Looking at another 10 cents average probably in the next 2 weeks. Like, I think we're back to, like I said, back to normal, quote unquote.
I think this is definitely optimistic in some regards, but I do want to hit two things. Number one, when it came to the Biden jobs report, I haven't got a chance to really go over that in super detail. But one of the things that concerns me is that this is literally one of the most anti-democratic jobs report I've seen in a long time. And what I mean by that is that it used to be when a Democratic jobs report would come out under a Democratic administration, it would have lower job numbers than what you would see under a Republican. But what you would see is that these were long-term jobs, these were healthier jobs, these were career and salary jobs, is what we would see under the Democrats. The Republicans whenever they pushed out economic numbers, they would have a lot of these like high volume, part-time, 1099 jobs that would fire off. And the thing that I've seen, at least with this one, at least what's been indicated to me, is that that's actually what we're seeing this time under a Democratic administration, is that people are, taking up jobs at DoorDash, like yours truly, or Aflac, or whatever the hell else. And we're not seeing nearly the career growth that provides people $20,000, $30,000 a year. We're seeing a lot more. I'm sorry. Did I say 20, 30? I meant like $40,000 and $50,000 a year jobs. We're seeing a lot of 20 and 30,000 year jobs under a Democratic administration, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, but that's the new normal. Cypher got this right. Like that's just the new normal. That's been true since 2010.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
okay. Well,
because I get your point, but I just think like the second Obama term was exactly what you were describing, Ty. No, I mean, it wasn't like the historical. You were talking about Clinton, right? You're right. The Clinton numbers were like unbelievably good. And then, of course, the Obama numbers were weird because he came in right during the middle of the great financial crisis. But the second half of his, I think that Cypher's characterization that we're back to the last 12 years.
Yeah,
I think that's right. Because it's been sucky for a decade. Sorry, Ty. What have you been doing for the last decade? You've been sucking on the teat of a sucky economy, and it sucks. And that's exactly the problem. Trump didn't do anything to fix it, and I think that Biden could do more to fix it. Let's put it that way.
Okay, that's fine.
And to that point, though, we saw job growth across all industries. Now, most of those were in the service industry, but again, that's because people are actually taking their money that they spent during the pandemic on stuff and spending it on events and outings and stuff like that now. So you're seeing the reconfiguration of the pandemic economy going back to, quote, the new normal, because we're a service-based economy that happened to go through a year or two where people couldn't go out and do things. So they bought stuff and sat at home and did everything that they could to avoid, getting COVID and potentially dying. And
there's an important factor that everybody's forgetting in here, and that our economy goes through cycles, I guess, if you want to call it such, where, for example, like with gas prices tend to go up typically in the summer, and they tend to decline after the summer because of traveling and stuff like that. And the same likelihood with the service workers, right? I would imagine that we would have people more at home, more able to go out and do things during the summer. And so we would see likely employment skyrocket during the summer. So these are things to keep in mind as we're going through all this, is that just before we start cheering, not to cheer too early either.
All right.
Well, these are
Doghouse.
seasonal. Aren't they seasonally adjusted though? Like that's how
they are seasonally adjusted.
Tamp that down.
Okay. Let me tell you. So Doghouse, I get your point, and I just put up all the bad news. That's the thing that I just tried to share with Ty. I don't know if he can share it to everybody, but
I got it.
So let's talk about the good news. Think of this last jobs report with full recovery from the pandemic, right? Like if you just look, all the jobs that were lost in 2020, it took us this long to get them all back. We just got the last of them back, and that means it's sort of the suckier jobs. Ty's point is not wrong. It's a lot of part-time work. It's a lot of people who are now doing 2 and 3 jobs, right? That kind of a situation. But frankly, that was the situation we were in at the end of 2019. And like that's what we did was we just pulled the 2019 employment situation to the present. And if you recall, Trump was like, "Oh, I'm the sexiest president who's ever lived. Look, everybody's got a job." We're basically back to that exact same spot. We're like so close. We are so close. The only reason that we're a little bit different now is the participation rate has changed, mostly because of early retirements and then people who decided to not work because of real COVID concerns, like the truly compromised, have not really gone back to work all the way, or if they have, it's in a different capacity. So there's a little bit of separation there, but it's like super, super tiny. So yes, the Democrats should be doing a victory lap right now. Employment is saving the day. However, there's still problems, but I mean, I think they should be very happy right now.
One thing about the early retirement numbers, ironically, crypto minted a lot of new millionaires. They completely dropped out of the labor market, and those new millionaires were highly concentrated on the young demographics. We're talking people between the ages of 24 and 36. I want to say that's where there was mostly concentrated at. So labor force participation, that number is just broken forever now. We need a new number. We need it's not going back, people. It counts too many things that people generally see as positive. For example, if you got a pay increase between 2020 and 2022 that allowed you to have one parent sit at home and watch your kids during the pandemic, and that was good for them and your family, what's the point of that person going back to work? There isn't one. That's a negative on that front.
This is and the thing is with this though is it's very difficult to say that what kind of a pay increase per se would replace another or significant other's salary. I mean, even like looking at my own personal situation and anecdotally speaking, yes, my wife got a pay increase, but it was nowhere near enough to really warrant her staying home or anything like that, because we just can't afford that. Even I mean, if we're talking like a $10 or $15 increase per hour, absolutely. But we're talking like $2 or $3 an hour, maybe $5 at the most.
And so it depends on the economic strata that you're in too, right? So I don't know your personal situation, Doghouse. Do you have kids?
Sure, no, I do. I have a child.
So how much was your child care?
So that is a factor that we have considered, is how much are we paying in childcare versus how much I would have to make extra to cover that childcare cost. But there's also the problem with that is it's not just merely childcare costs. There are other bills that get considered into that. When you make an income, all of that comes into play.
Right.
whether it be housing, cars, electricity, water, so on and so on and so forth, rent, mortgage.
So let's look at the lowest income tier here. That is where a lot of the income increases have been concentrated at. Middle's been squeezed a little bit. Okay, don't get me wrong. But people in the upper inbound of income, people making anywhere between as a single income, we'll say $80,000, but as a dual income, we'll say 90 and 130,000. Had an increase, and the people on the bottom had an increase because of the wage labor pressure from the
bottom,
labor at the bottom. So if you were
McDonald's at $15 an hour, totally agree.
McDonald's at $15 an hour, right? So if you had to survive off of two incomes at $10 an hour, and you were paying out of that shitty childcare cost that was eating half of that, and you're suddenly at 20. Why are you going to pay for that? Pay for the child?
Are you saying somebody that was like one person was making $10 an hour and they went up to 20? That seems.
I'm saying two people making $10 to $11 an hour, struggling. Then one of those people got into an $18 to $22 an hour job. That would be by childcare cost. And so those people would drop out of labor force.
They started doing OnlyFans, Doghouse. Don't freak out. They're making good money now.
I'm looking at going from $10 to $20 an hour. I mean, again, we've seen McDonald's workers go up to 15. So I suppose there is a realm where it could have been they were making 9 or 10 and they went up to 15. Yes. But we're talking about a $10 an hour increase in one spouse's income, and I just don't see that.
Changing. A lot of people changed jobs during the pandemic, quit their shitty service industry jobs, got training or whatever else have you, or moved into a better paying position because they're quit and was able to get hired and had up to double their income made. And I'm saying people in that situation cannot justify paying for childcare since half of that income alone is going to go to childcare. At least half of it. That's how expensive childcare is. So the people that are in that situation are going to drop out.
Well, my wife stays home.
Yeah, I mean, because like,
and I'm not saying
three kids. It's got three. I got 3 niños. You count that up. She have to be making like 90 grand.
No, seriously. Like that's what it's the average cost is $1,000 per child for childcare. Yeah, it's fucking ridiculous. Right. Yeah, per month. Yeah, and
I'd be dropping $36,000 to $40,000. Yeah, that's right. And she doesn't get counted in GDP, and that's bullcrap. Universal basic income. No, I digress. Okay, Doghouse, I get it. You know, you have a bunch of good points. I kind of don't care about this conversation. I want to switch. I just want to say, Doghouse, his spidey sense is saying, why doesn't it feel like most of the people I know are getting a relief inside of their budgets if everybody's got a job and everybody's getting pay raises, right? Because both of those things have basically happened. People are working hard and they're actually making more money than they used to be, but they're still feeling the crunches. Part of that's the inflation. That's not all of it, though. Right? That's not all of it. And so Doghouse's point is good. The Democrats have gotten us to this spot, and it was an important spot to get to. The question now becomes, how do you go to the next level? Can 0.5% of GDP growth next year make people happy? Right? If some of these inflationary pressures persist, if the whole country can't generate more goods and services, then where is the raise going to come from? And then this brings up my little graph over here, which I sent earlier, and Cypher was like, what is this mess? Okay,
yeah, I can't.
So this mess.
Before you go on, can you hit F11 on your screen so it gets a little bigger?
Hi, F11. Oh, here, I can do that here. Maybe. Boom. Is that a little better?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, good. Yeah. All right, so these are the 4 lines of doom. That's what I would guess I would call them. The red line is what we'll look at first. It's the easiest to see, and it's also the weirdest. That's savings. So that's savings for consumers. This is consumer saving. So, hey, check it out. Whenever the government sends helicopter money, Americans save it. So, by the way, this is actually really critical, I think, for UBI folks like myself. We actually have some evidence now that Americans are actually pretty good about taking care of cash that's sent directly to their bank account, because look at those savings rates. The savings rates, especially in the 2020, when those first stimulus checks came out, they immediately got saved and paid down debt. I didn't put up any debt numbers on here, but like it was incredible. They paid off credit cards, they paid off personal loans, and they saved all at the same time. It was truly marvelous to behold. It was unbelievable. But you can see Here's what inflation has done since the last round of money in March of 2021, plus the child tax credits a little bit. Inflation has eaten into those, and now we're actually below trend line from 2020. So like that's a little bit of a concern, right? So even though things are good, people have jobs, savings are still getting eroded away. Cypher mentioned this earlier. They're going now to their credit cards. We could talk about that another week. The next weird green line that is close to the red line, that is global trade since 2020. And you'll notice something, that America drives global trade in a big way. So Americans send out a bunch of helicopter money and global trade starts to immediately trend up. Even though the rest of the world was shut down super hard in 2020, American consumers saved the whole world economy. Yes, Europe, you're welcome. Now, as Americans' savings rates go down, you see that world trade, since its peak in March of 2021, it is not going the right way. So that means global GDP is bad. So we could go a tour around the world. Japan, in recession. China, we don't know, but we know they're in recession. Europe, in recession. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, recession, recession, recession. The US is the only stable ship out on the ocean right now. It's totally wild to me what's happening out there. And it's a fascinating question. Can the United States get some economic growth inside of an environment where all of their neighbors and trading partners are negative? Totally crazy. The purple line.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just so,
Yeah.
So, Professor, I need to ask you an economic. So, when you're saying negative, are you talking about negative GDP growth, or are we talking about?
Yes.
Because so was it the past 2 quarters? Now I know that this is a hot button issue.
Oh boy.
Oh my God.
I got blocked on Twitter for this today, guys.
Okay.
I don't get blocked very often, but I got blocked on Twitter today because of this.
I'm asking this out of like genuine sincerity, not like a gotcha, because like this has been a very hot button question, and me and Cypher even got into this about the colloquial versus the NEBR definition of recession.
Yeah.
And that's why I was curious, like, over the past 2 quarters, we've had a negative GDP decline. Granted, it's not been steep. I'll give you that.
Right. It's a slight. So if it is recession, it's the most mild recession in the history of recessions. But yes, it's slightly negative. So here's my answer to your question, because after I got blocked today by a Keynesian econ guy who's written a very interesting book, and I really like him as a Twitter follow. He's a blue check mark. He blocked the crap out of me. Over this exact topic. And like, it was not deserved. I think he was in a mood, but whatever, life is life, right? Because I think he was dealing with a lot of crap today having to do with some inflation issues and his definition of inflation, which is a little bit goofy dukes, but whatever, I digress. So to answer your question, Doghouse, it goes like this. Everywhere and always, the definition was 2 quarters consecutive of negative GDP growth as a recession until 1977. In 1977, the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States got its dual mandate, and it said full employment. And so one of the things that Congress did was it included language in a resolution that the NEBR said, we're going to weight the labor part highly inside of our equation for recession. So if we have slightly negative GDP, they are actually thinking about the opposite problem. You can't say, I have great GDP, but we're losing jobs, because that was happening in the late 70s.
Yep.
So like assume GDP was awesome in like quarter four of 78 and Q1 of 79, but jobs went down, right? So imagine that scenario. Congress wanted a recession to appear in the data given that kind of an environment, because Congress wanted the Fed and other institutions inside the executive to say, no. It's not just about making the rich people rich. We got to take care of people. So we want employment to be a bigger part of the equation, so that positive GDP, we still want the recession flag to go up, even if GDP is slightly positive. Okay, that was the idea. Well, in this goofy Duke's world, 40 years later, we now have this situation where the NBRE or NEBR are like, hey, NBER, they say, hey, the employment numbers are really good, so we must not be in recession, even though the GDP numbers aren't very good. And so that's why this has happened. If you look at like the IMF and some of the other, like the World Bank, they do not have it weighted regarding employment like the US does. And so this is what the big difference is. So it just depends. What's more important to you, GDP growth or the employment pool? And if the employment pool is the most important thing, then things look okay. They don't look great, but they look okay. So that's
Yeah, and from the research I've been able to do in terms of this particular topic is the conclusion I came to was that colloquially, whatever you want to call that damn word, we have used negative 2 consecutive quarters. And matter of fact, it's been used in public speeches and stuff, right?
Mhm.
I mean, we've seen it with like Obama or whatever it was, or Clinton or whatever. But the NEBR is the one that's kind of like the referee in this that says, hey, yes, we are in a recession. But it seems like from what I understand, the NEBR may not release their findings until we're deep into the recession or well after the recession has ended.
Well, the way to say that, Doghouse, is they reserve the right to change their minds later. So
right. Well, and that's been my main concern, is that it's like two sides are right on this, but in different degrees. You know, it's
okay. Let me tell you, Doghouse, because I like your point. I just want to highlight this. So obviously, President Biden doesn't like the R word. Okay, now why wouldn't he like the R word? It means it's a lot of heat for him. However, we need to be really clear about this. What Democrats want to do, the largest impediment for them to achieve what they want to achieve is still inflation. Okay, so like if let's just say for a minute that Biden came out and said, yeah, we're in recession right now. The reason he might say that is because that will hurt his popularity, right? But if he were to say that, he would have to immediately follow up and say, so my next economic plan or bill that's going into Congress is going to be a huge spending bill. We're going to forgive student loans and we're going to get checks out to Americans. Well, you can't do that in the environment of high inflation. So to Biden's credit, he has not run away from the inflation question, right? And why is that? Because he knows that for the agenda of the Democratic Party, since I've been alive, the largest impediment that they have is to get through the inflation issue. And the reason he's so excited is the passing of this most recent bill and a zero print for July coincide at the same time. So the largest Republican talking point to attack the bill isn't there, right? You could say, well, there's still generally high inflation in the economy, but it's moving in the opposite direction. And so that's why the messaging looked a little goofy, Dukes. And I think that there will come a time where Biden does use the R word, but he's going to use it and say, therefore, let's do something about it, right? Yeah. He said, look, there's inflation. We're going to do something about it. Inflation Protection Act. The next one is going to be recession. Oh, look, let's do something about it. Let's get the child tax credit going. Let's get money out to people for child.
Yes.
Right. See, stuff like that. So that's why the word game has been so confusing for people.
What about the because I remember when me and Cypher were going back and forth on this, there was a study or a report that I had linked. I had to look for it and dig it up, but I think it was the CBO report or something, some kind of report that looked at the impact from the NRA, and it seemed that it was relying very heavily on the whole pay for itself thing based on the 15% corporate tax. Very heavily. In fact, it was like 50+% or something like that, if I recall.
Well, okay, yeah. So, Doghouse, this is a good point. So, of course, one of the ways that you can try to control inflation is by taxing the people, right? Now, as a Democrat, of course, you want to keep all of that pain on the bad guys, which is the Zuckerbergs of the universe, right? So, like, that's cool.
Yeah, fuck Zuck.
And corporations generally, right? But to your point, the theory then has to be that we're going to cause corporations to pay more to help keep inflation down, because otherwise the $400 billion it'll flow out into an economy and it will cause prices to rise. In order to fight that, they have to have a tax in there. So, I mean, you're not wrong.
Yeah, and that was my concern, is without that 15%, that it would basically mean that it's belly up, because it relies so heavily on that 15% corporate tax.
Sure.
Yeah, from the CBO's perspective, that's true, yeah.
I mean, that's generally true too, even from MMT perspective, that it's going to be that way. So
yeah, okay. And now I just want to mention too, I'm actually on team deflation. I've been on team deflation for a long time. So unless the government chooses to spend more money, the Democrats are going to continue to look like geniuses, except we'll get into a deeper recession. So like I think right now, all of the momentum is to disinflation. And I actually do think it'll wipe out, unless the government takes action, it's going to wipe out all of the inflation that we've seen, right? And then once all that gets wiped out, then jobs will start to get lost. and then we're into a deflationary spiral, and then the government has to act. So now the hard part comes, and this is why if I'm a Democrat and I'm with you, Doghouse, you've got to be very careful about what you do next, because they have to time the reversal at the right moment. They've got to find ways to get money to the people to help keep the teeter-totter from not overcorrecting the other direction.
No,
Because
it's
right
okay.
now, all the data I've seen is going the other direction, right, in the actual real economy. And just to get back to my last slide, and then I can get off of this, the purple line is corporate profits. So like if you look at corporate profits in 2022, they only go to like the middle of March, April, right? So Q1. But like all of the data coming out of the individual corporations before they're put together by, I think it's the Bureau of Economic Analysis, did this number. Corporate profits are down. This is why GDP is shrinking, right? The corporations are losing money, even though everybody's employed. And then if you look at the green line, then that's our GDP generally. And GDP is down slightly. That's not a huge decline, but it's heading south. So you've got savings heading south, global trade heading south, corporate profits heading south, and GDP is following those three mega trends. And so the Democrats they're in a situation where they will continue to head south until like the war in Ukraine ending. That might help stabilize things so they can start heading north again, right? That would be good. Technological breakthrough would be good. Or we probably are going to need another round of stimulus in 2023, or else we'll hit a deep, nasty recession. So that's
sorry.
No, that's all. That's kind of where I'm at.
So to your point, Nate, though, Democrats don't have to worry about it because the likelihood of the Democrats maintaining the House and the Senate is virtually none. And so we'll just blame it on the Republicans when they take over and refuse to do any stimulus spending. And then the economy goes south and it'll be like, hey, look, we told y'all. And
I love it.
Like,
I love it.
Bruh.
Yeah, well, okay, now this is a doghouse and tie question. So do either of you think the Republicans will blink? Like, let's assume McCarthy is in charge of the House, which, by the way, he couldn't run as for speaker for like a lot of years. He was like the number 2 guy for like a lot of years, and people kept going over the top of him to be speaker because his personal life is such a dumpster fire. But Trump normalized everything, and it's like the fact that you're kind of a bad person doesn't matter. So anyway, he's good to go now. But Doghouse and Ty, do you think that if McCarthy's in charge and the economy starts to look like it's going to crater mid-2023, and I don't just mean like, it kind of sucks, like it actually, like, no, like there's a problem, like we're running out of stuff here. Do you think he'll blink and save the economy, or is he just going to let this baby go down in flames into 2024 and we're going to be shooting each other? Because he might have to play ball.
So I go,
I can't speak to this because, quite honestly, the idea and the notion that a Speaker of the House is actually going to get off their ass and fucking do something blows my mind. So I'm gonna I'm gonna be 100% honest with that. So on the other side of that is that what is Joe Biden going to do? Number one, there is a big conversation on, is the Senate going to flip? Because every number that we have seen regarding the Senate is that it's probably a lot closer than some people led on to. Now, in some ways, this blows my mind, but it looks like in the states that matter, the Roe decision actually did piss off some really key people.
Let's go Fetterman.
Really didn't know. Okay. Number two is that while the House is probably going to swing 30 points, and I don't know, or I'm absolutely amazed it isn't going to swing 50, is that the reality at least is that by every number, the Republicans probably take the House and they probably have about 227 seats to anywhere between 240. I know that's a bit of a margin, but some of those races are going to be close. The fact that we're getting to the point where the country is so locked between districts that there literally is only about 30 swing districts in the country is concerning to me. I don't know if that's actually a sign that we've actually done our districting really, really well or really, really bad, but that's a whole conversation for later. What does import me is this. The House is probably going Republican. The Senate's a toss-up, but at that point, I don't think it really terribly matters. And then it's down to the fact that the presidency is still going to be a Democrat. You've got a divided government at that point. And it's already been kind of divided as it is all the way up until the fact that Joe Manchin decided he remembered he was a Democrat again. So I just don't see anyone doing anything the next 2 years.
Well, okay. Then I mentioned this on our last show when Sam was here. And I think that if that's the case, number one, any bumps in the road in 2023 should terrify us. Right? Because if there is a huge economic downturn in, say, March of 2023, then there's not going to be a big response. If McCarthy's really going to dig his heels in, 2023 could get very nasty very fast. And number two, that means President Biden is going to set the world record for executive orders in a small window of time. He is going to tax holiday everything. Because the only way then to get stimulus out to the people is to basically just say, we're dropping all middle class taxes, like anything he can find. And he'll be like, fine, sue me, take me to the Supreme Court. It doesn't matter. I've got to save the economy.
Yeah.
And so that's when student loan relief could happen, right? He could make some executive orders taking money from parts of the government that he doesn't like so much and redeploying them into places like food stamps, right? He could do like national mandates to tell the universities, you have to take haircuts on all of your, tuition this year. Like crazy stuff could happen. And I would anticipate that he's going to push the envelope in every direction if McCarthy's not going to play ball, because otherwise it's just watch the country sink. I think 2023 is going to be really tough. It's possible that the rest of the world will start to recover and then we'll be okay. But remember, we are fighting the inertia of everybody else going negative. The U.S. has to not just lead, but drag 6 billion people with us into growth. And that's tough. That's a tough deal.
Yeah, I don't. Oh, I'm sorry, Cypher. You haven't talked very much.
No, go for it, and then I'll break in.
Yeah. So, if I were to say, I can't sit here and make an educated guess as to one way or the other. I'm going to lean more towards the Democrat way and say that what's going to end up happening is that McCarthy will probably try to pass some legislation to say that, hey, I tried doing it. In reality, it was loaded with something the Democrats didn't like, and God forbid we have a split Congress, then something like that could happen. In terms of how midterms can go, I think that it could be anybody's race at this point. I think that this whole FBI thing, not that I'm in support of whatever was going on, but I think it re-energized, and just from my dog sense, if you will, not spidey sense, but dog sense, I'm getting a lot of whatever. I'm trying to say re-energizing of the Republican base due to this. And of course, then you got the IRS thing going around, which that's another. I've literally been, by the way, just a side note, I've officially been called a far left operative. Literally, in some circles, I've been called a far left operative. Kid you not. So anyways, it's anybody's guess.
Yeah, so to Nate's point about all this doom and gloom, I am not on team deflation, at least not team deflation deeply. I think we might have some deflation. Again, this is as supply chains normalize, we're going to see prices fall because that's what happens when you have a supply crunch, right? So if the prices fall, that's a good thing. Well, it depends on if they're going to cascade and go into a deflation spiral. I don't see that happening. And the reason I don't see that happening is because the Fed is going to either tap the brakes and stop it going to let off the brakes to stop it so that we get economic stimulus from the Fed, or there's going to be some sort of, like Nate said, Biden coming in with like loan forgiveness or pause on debt or something like that they can do from it. I also don't think that the numbers that we have from the last quarter are official yet. The first round of numbers always comes out and it always gets revised. How it's going to get revised, I don't know. It's possible it gets revised downward, but the numbers were so close and the job numbers so good, I don't think it's going to get revised downward. It might get revised upward, but again, we're talking like 1 percentage point either way, so it's not deep, not deep regardless of which way it goes. So I'm not on team deflation. I don't think we're going to have this doom and gloom thing, but China is a big part of the global economy, and they're playing fuck games, so that's it.
Doghouse, did you want to say something? Because if not, I have lots of things to say.
Now, so give me just 1 second.
All right, no, you take your time. Okay, so my response to you, Cypher, is that's actually quite good, assuming that the world isn't bleeding. But if you have the EU and China and Canada and Australia, and they're all trending the wrong direction, then it is hard for me to think like, oh yeah, we just sort of normalize, because 2019 normalization for the rest of the world, much harder sell, right? Like you could sell me, the US will normalize in 2022, so that we're more or less back to where we were in our 2019 economy, I think there's a very good case for that to be made. That is not true in Germany. That is not true in France. That is not true in Great Britain. It's not true in Spain. It's not true in Brazil. It's not true in Japan. It's not true in China. It is probably true in South Korea, by the way, where you just were. But like, if you just look around the world, it's like, okay, if 18 of the G20 are in hard situations, maybe our economy is so big and so awesome and so detached, we'll just shrug off the rest of the world's hardships. But that to me is like this extra lag that I'm like, that's just a lot to overcome.
I think China is going to come through and fix their housing problem, and that's going to fix a lot of their issues.
Oh, they're gonna build more houses for nobody, and they'll be
no, not that. They're just going to pay off the debt
and building more houses there. That's how they're going to do it.
I didn't hear you, Doghouse. Can you repeat yourself?
Oh, I was saying that China is going to increase their housing, whatever you call it, capacity by taking over Taiwan, and then saying,
okay. So the issue with China right now isn't a housing crisis of not enough housing. It's a housing crisis caused by the fact that people they prepay their mortgages essentially before the things are built, and because of the recession that they're going through, the developers have stopped building, and so people are refusing to pay their mortgages, which are backing other securities, because they're being told to go fuck yourselves. We're not going to have your house built for you like we said it was, because we're going under. So what I think is going to happen is that China's just going to do a giant jubilee and say fuck it, we take over everything again, and then fix that problem. But in the interim, Xi Jinping's using it to do another power consolidation, which is why you have the fuckery going on with COVID still about the zero COVID cases thing, and using that to parlay into a bigger power grab. So when do I think that's going to happen? Probably won't be before the midterms, but it'll be before 2024. I know it's a big time span, but I think that's the more likely thing, unless somebody assassinates Xi Jinping, and then, well, everything's fucked.
Okay. Hey man, you just got banned from traveling to China. No, I'm just kidding.
Right?
Okay, so TOS. No,
well,
okay.
I wasn't
so
saying that it's going to happen.
I know, just give you a hard time. No, I just wanted to say that China is near the point where even if you just forgive debt, okay, like when you forgive debt, that means you are foregoing income, right? Like debt in terms of, so like let's just be clear, what is debt? And then I want to have like a little MMT conversation for a second, okay? Like I actually see this as super, super important. So
yeah, that's good.
I do not believe we have tried MMT in the United States yet. I want to be very clear about this. I know a lot of people are like, oh, big deficit spending means that we have MMT. Like, no. I want to be very specific as to why I think that, and it has to do with this technical definition of debt. So debt is an exchange of future spending brought into the present for the trade-off of decreased spending in the future. Okay, that's like what debt is. So I'm going to take future dollars, pull them into the present, and then I'm exchanging them. Those future dollars then extinguish once I get to the future. Now, the hope is I grow the economy in the meantime, doesn't matter. It's fine. So this is not me saying like debt is bad. I just think that that's what the trade-off is. Once you get to the point where true debt jubilee is placed on the table, right? Because right now, what's the United States doing? What's China doing? They're rolling the debt, meaning they need new debt. So they still go out to the market, the actual real life market, and they trade securities that are made out of thin air, treasuries and bonds and T-bills. Right? They take those, they make them, they print those, and they exchange them for real dollars in the economy, and those dollars come back. Now they have to pay the dollars back to the people who purchased the bonds at time of maturity. And so when that moment comes, we just issue new ones and sell them to the open market. And the open market has always obliged. We still have not seen a moment where the market has said, no, I'm not going to do this. But what Cypher, I think, is indicating is, well, China might just try to bypass going to the open market and just start forgiving debt, meaning they're not going to go to the open market and actually pull new dollars in. Well, if you do that, this breaks the relationship between your debt and your ability to grow, because you're robbing somebody else of income. I need to be very clear about this. If the Chinese are saying we're going to forgive a bunch of this debt, so it helps the debtors, but the debt holders now lose their income. That means China loses income. They're destroying one of the mechanisms by which they're able to make money. And I know that sounds like totally backwards, but if you own your own debt and then you forgive your own debt, that means you're foregoing the future income that holding that debt was going to generate. And so this is why they're toying with actually crossing the Rubicon and saying we're going to start extinguishing debt and just printing new without creating this weird relationship of income and interest and everything else. And inside the United States, by the way, the best MMTers, well, there's two of them. Mosler is the best. If you say Stephanie Kelton, we're going to have fights. Mosler's the best.
I mean,
and then Nathan... She's not that good. And Nathan Tankis is the other super genius in that universe. Okay. So Nathan Tankis is super smart. And he says, in order for us to become an MMT nation, the Fed must be able to issue its own securities. And right now it doesn't. Everything that's on the balance sheet of the Fed is the treasuries. And Treasury is bound to go through the process of issuing debt to the public and then having that kind of relationship. And then the Fed goes into the secondary market and soaks it up. And Nathan Tankis says, no. The way we're going to become a true MMT nation is by allowing the Fed to print their own securities. And if you do that, now you're into MMT land. Okay. And this is important. I'm telling you right now, this is like an important technical distinction. I know it's super nerdy, but the reason it matters so much is because right now, the issuers of debt are making a ton of money. And if you forgive debt, that means you punish the people who issued the debt, even if it's the federal government. So you're messing up the circular flow of cash inside of the business cycle, which has basically held since Bretton Woods in every major economy on the planet. And if you're going to break that, that's cool. Like, I'm not saying that it's not time to contemplate that. There's very good, humane reasons to do it. Just know, when you cross that Rubicon, you are entering a new thing. The past is no longer helpful to you because you have changed the circular flow of money once you actually start to do that. And if China does it, it means that they're in really bad shape and they're already in recession. Like, why would you do it otherwise? Yeah. Right? So to get themselves out of recession, if they start forgiving debt, that's fine. But that means they're shooting somebody's income in the head. And if that income dries up, the new income must come from somewhere, or else you remain in recession. All you've done is moved the pain to a different area of the economy. The pain's still there. So it's an interesting problem. It's a very interesting problem. I would keep an eye on it. And this is why I think the Democrats might be in a situation where they need one more good bill before. Actually, it would be helpful for Biden if the recession hit in October and they were able to have an emergency session and they were able to win and get a bunch of stuff through and keep the economy humming for one more year. And then in 2024, he can try again. The Republicans can say no. And he's like, I saved us in 2022, and the Republicans aren't letting me do it right now. So if I were a Dem, I would be cheering for a fast reversal and a recession in October, emergency session, everybody votes, we save the economy, the Republicans still win, and then you go off into 2023 and it's stable. And that's probably what they need to do, but it needs to be debt-based. It can't be printed, or else it's going to be a problem. So, that's all. That's my rant.
Yeah. So Nate, you forgot the part where Biden slowly claps because he can't mentally be able to like clap really quickly.
Hey, I want to say, as a voter, I voted for Joe Biden. Okay, I would recommend that he take more naps. That's all I'm saying. Like, I'm just saying, the president, he doesn't need to show off. There's a lot of good reporting that he is working long hours at the White House. Stop that. Reagan was done at 5. You can be done at 5. Old guys can take naps. It's fine. Just own it. Be like, you know what? I'm going to take a lot of naps. I'm going to focus on a few things. And then I'm going to dish out stuff to my cabinet. I'm not dishing it out to Kamala. Guys, Kamala's a disaster. I don't know how this, like, I thought she was going to be much better than this. She's been weird. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Doesn't matter. It's not relevant. But Biden needs to take more naps. I'm on team nap. More naps for Biden. I want that to start trending on Twitter. I want my president to be doing good things and not feeling like he has to prove himself. You don't have to prove yourself. You're president of the freaking country. You've done a million interesting good things in your life. You don't have to dick measure with anybody else ever again. Just take naps. Give us your best self. And if that means more naps, that means more naps. It's fine. Just own it.
Yeah.
Do a presser in slippers. It's fine. Like, just do it. It's fine. It's not a big deal. We're millennials. We don't care. The boomers already hate him. Doesn't matter. They're dying. The boomers are dying. You don't want their votes anyway. Let them vote for Trump. It doesn't matter. Come out in slippers and in flip-flops and be like, guys, I was just taking a nap. And all the millennials will be like, oh, it's a freaking great job. I think Biden's doing awesome. All his, he'll become much more like on point during his conferences. It'll be lovely. Just take more naps, President. That's all I'm saying.
I obviously didn't vote for Biden. And it's funny, too, that same person who called me a far-left operative when I explained to them I voted for Romney, Trump, and then Cruz in Texas Senate. He didn't believe me, and he said that I'm a far left operative still. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? Pull up my ballot? Like, what the fuck? Like, I don't know how else to prove to you that I vote. Like, I just made a bold claim to, and on this, in this case, everybody, to let them know, hey, I voted for like straight Republicans here, and I'm probably like, by that definition alone, considered a Republican. Not to mention, all the other stuff, but no, like.
Doghouse, I will never call you a leftist. You've won me over. You've flashed your bona fides. I'll come to your defense in the chat. I'll be like, no, Doghouse hates trans people just as much as any other Republican. It's fine.
No, look. You know what though? It's so freaking hard to be like 1 minute where I'm like, okay, I can finally side with my righties on this when we're talking about like recession, for example, or something like that. But then they go and make some stupid ass freaking assertion about like the IRS coming to knock at your door, bust it down, and shoot you in the face. I'm like, bro, you had me and then you lost me. You do this to me. You reel me in and then you lose
Doghouse,
me.
you don't realize how often Cypher gets into fights with leftists who think that he's also a far-right fascist. Like, this is really funny that you're telling us this right now. You two are like the same guy, just like degrees different on the scale. It's very funny.
I told if any of y'all have ever interacted with this guy named Spectre Dave on Demon Machine, anyways, I told him, I was like, look, if I'm far left by some on the right and I'm far right by some on the left, then I'm doing something right, and that's all that matters to me, because that means I'm principled as fuck, so I'm happy with it. But like, it's a constant back and forth game with like my party. I'm like, oh yes, they're doing good. Oh, you're talking about some stupid shit with the IRS because nobody knows what the fuck goes on with the IRS. Okay, thank you, dumbasses. All right.
Well, I mean, they don't want the IRS to exist, right? So anytime you say the IRS is getting expanded, they're going to come for you and your family, and they're going to blast you down with the fucking shotgun and steal your baby and turn them into far-right leftist activists.
The thing is, though, is that the IRS meme was such an easy optics win for the Republicans. It's unreal how easy of an optics win it is, because literally nobody has any idea what goes on at the IRS. You just know you file your taxes and that's it. People don't realize the like in-depth shit that goes on at the IRS. And so like when you have a majority of the population who has no idea what goes on, and you see that they're like there are special agents that are being told to use deadly force, they're thinking that the people who are basically filing your taxes are going to come knock at your door and bust it down and shoot you. What they don't see is that the complexity to start a criminal investigation where it involves the law enforcement division of the IRS, it's a lot lengthier than what it is. So typically you have you have your casual
mistake, 3 year, right?
So it's a little bit more it's like that, I think. But it's like where you have like you might mark your income wrong a little bit, right? May fidget, maybe like it was like $30 or $50. They're not concerned about that. Your special agents can get 2 shits less about that. They'll send you a bill for it. But the ones that it's large, the revenue agent, not the special agent, but the revenue agent is going to audit your paperwork. They're going to go through and then take a second look at it and go, okay, hey, something's fishy here. And if it rises to the degree of like tax fraud or something, then they'll reference it over to the special agents. Then the special agents will go about their court process. They are a law enforcement officer. I've gotten into debates with people about this. They are sworn in law enforcement officers. They are
Isn't
trained.
the Secret Service in charge or part of the IRS? Like, isn't that obvious to people?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, no, like to your point though, it's like I think they have multiple people carrying weapons at the IRS. That's my point.
Yeah. So
pretty much
that's
everybody
like
in the federal government does. Like,
and then like you look at the ammunition shit, and I looked into that. Okay. I'm sitting here, I'm like, okay, well, what's going on with this ammunition shit? This is no different. Literally the amount that they have spent is about on average for what they have spent in past.
Yeah,
and
that's fine. So, Doghouse, you have found a bunch of friends. None of us are worried about the IRS. So, we can continue to talk about this. I'm sorry that your chats are full of sociopaths. You can tell them Nate Dallin specifically told you that you were right about the IRS, and that should end the conversation. I give you the Nate Dallin card pass on the IRS topic, so you should be fine. I just wanted to, because we're getting to the point where my butt starts to hurt because I'm sitting on a steel chair, and so that's normally the time that I need to figure this out. It's the Fed's next moves. I wanted to end on this topic, if that's permissible. So here's the Fed's. It's the Fed's next moves. So there are 10 things that the Federal Reserve can do. Okay, it has 10 tools in its belt. And then it has a couple of temporary tools if the Treasury gets together and they decide to have a party during exigent circumstances. But the big 10, we're not going to name them all, but they're the ones that matter the most are overnight rates. That's a big one. Okay. The repo window. That's a big one. The reverse repo window. That's a big one. And then finally is their balance sheet. So that's quantitative easing. Right. So these are the four things: the rate at which they lend money to banks, the rate at which they lend they take treasury bonds away from hedge funds and give them money, and how often they get money from hedge funds in exchange for treasuries. That's the repo and reverse repo windows. And then finally, it's the quantitative easing, or like the size of the balance sheet, where they just buy stuff from the economy and they hold it. Okay. So if any of those things, if the balance sheet goes up, that means that they're fighting a recession. So if they start buying mortgages, if they start buying treasuries, that means they think that there's doghouse got bored. That means that they think there's a recession and they need to juice things. And then the rates at the repo windows, like what percent cut they want for doing business with hedge funds, and then also at their open window, which is the rate at which they do business with banks, that kind of tells us a lot. So here's the question. Cypher, the next meeting is in September. Do you think they raise rates or lower rates? What's just your gut tell you? Because I think we're going to get another 0 to slightly negative inflation print in August. So we're going to go into September where it's flat or slightly negative, but it'll still come up as like 7 whatever for the whole year. So is the Fed going to tighten again or not?
I don't know. Jerome Powell's kind of a Volcker acolyte, so probably keep the rates going, which
Okay.
I'm concerned about. I'm really concerned that the Fed is going to push us into stagflation. We're not there yet, but I think that they have the ability to do that.
But if it happens in October, it might actually be good for the Democrats. That's my take. Okay. Now, the second question then is, so rates go up, meaning the cost of doing business with the Fed goes up. Cool. And that tightens things and slows things down. So the second question then is, do you think that they might start buying stuff on the open market and bringing it onto their balance sheet? Right? Because they could talk out of both sides of their mouth on this, and they could say, I'm going to tighten,
question.
I'm going to be Volcker with the rates, but I'm going to turn around and I'm going to buy mortgages from banks. Right? So like, I'll make it expensive to work with me, but then I'm also going to go out and buy a bunch of stuff in the market. By the way, the reason I mention this is Europe started doing that exact thing this month. The European Central Bank, they raised rates, but they started buying stuff. So they were helping the market and then also slowing down money flow in the market. So they're slowing flow, but they're purchasing assets to help get new money into the system. So it's a slower flow, but more money. How do you like that?
I mean, money velocity is what matters more, I think. So
Right. So you would say, slow down the flow, the circular flow of money in the economy by raising rates, but eject more dollars into the system out the back end. So it's a slower flow, but more cash, more liquidity.
See, I just wish they would do this, but help middle class people. Put more money into my IRA,
this is
please.
tough. Yeah. Okay. So here. Okay. This is a good. Okay. So this is a good point, and everybody in chat should recognize this. When the Fed does those moves, the people that benefit first are bajillionaires.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is exactly right, because they are limited in their mandate, so they don't have access to the stuff we care about.
Yep.
The closest thing that they can do is they can buy mortgages from banks, which will help keep housing prices high. My guess is most of the people listening and most of the people on this panel are not actually interested in that. We're more interested in housing prices becoming a little bit more affordable so we can go buy houses. But if Ty wants his house to shoot up another 20%, that might happen.
I wouldn't mind my house going up another 50. So, but
all right, never mind. So maybe
would that say that I'm cool with my house going down to $150,000? I don't care. My equity doesn't fucking matter to me. I don't give a shit.
But that's the thing. That's the only way that the Fed kind of gets its fingers into Main Street, because everything else they do, they just have to hope that the banks, the hedge funds, and the credit markets will go help Main Street. It's just their hope. They do what they can. Right, because legally they're just not able to do much else. And so it is. Every time the Fed increases quantitative easing and pushes money out the back, you end up with financial stuff going really high. And sometimes that leads to wealth inequality issues. Sometimes it doesn't. Depends how they do it and how long they do it. But anyway, so that's what I'm looking for. I actually think that's my case. I think that they're going to raise rates and then print more money into the economy, and it's going to be goofy. They're going to simultaneously increase the speed and hit the brakes at the same time. So crazy dance they're doing. The other thing is they could just shock me and come out and say, we're just doing no rate hikes. We're just going to let things ride. That's probably the right choice, by the way. That's probably the right choice.
What I think is going to happen, I don't think they're going to go with the European Central Bank model of tapping the brakes and hitting the gas at the same time so we go into a tailspin. What I think is going to end up happening is that they said there was going to be a 0.75 basis point raise. That might come down to 0.5. I think that's where Powell is going to be at. He's going to be like, we're going to ease off the brake a little bit. But we're still going to have it tapped because inflation numbers are high because everybody doesn't realize that inflation lags by a fucking year, basically. Like that's what it basically boils down to. Everybody needs to pay attention to the month over month numbers a lot more than what they're doing and not ignore the year over year. The year over year is important, but for trajectory, month over month is more important. And if you're seeing a downcrease in the month over month, that's going to take 2 or 3 months to see that downcrease in the year over year because prices are still going up. You're still dealing with the supply shortages and everything like that. So maybe a 0.5. I really was hoping he would do a 0.5 this time around, but he did 0.75. The ghost of Volcker rises again and we'll never get the fuck off our back. But Biden could also come through with a $10,000 forgiveness right before the midterm, buy some of the votes, and also hit the gas on the fiscal side. So we'll see.
Well, I wish that were true. That the funny thing is, since we've been in forbearance, forgiving it doesn't have as much punch as if we were paying. So, but I get your point.
It depends though. So if they forgive, so there's one thing that he could do, which I think is in his power, and a lot of people would be like, okay, there wouldn't be as much pushback, broadly speaking, as there would be for full forgiveness. What I could see possibly being done by the stroke of a pen, and I'm not saying Biden is going to do this, but it's a path, is not only forgive 10,000, but wipe out any interest accrued in the last 5 years.
Okay, yeah, that'd be big. Yeah, that'd be big.
So what that would do is you don't forgive it all, but you make people, you're going to have people, some people are going to have their loans just completely forgiven. That is going to be people in the lower economic strata, and less payments going out, but payments still going out. So it's going to tap the brake, but not as much as it could. And that 10,000 forgiveness will free up some people, make people feel less indebted and more likely to spend because they don't have to worry about that hanging over their head. So it's a weird situation that could happen, and I'd be interested to see it happen. So.
That's cool. I'd never heard of that. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. Ty, you got anything? Chat says we're dumb, so we should probably just peace out. We caused all the paint in all of their houses to start to crack. We just sucked all the moisture out.
Yeah, so I'll split hairs here. First thing, what should actually happen overall is that this country needs to understand what a healthy interest rate is, whether one way or another. I totally get the idea where you're like, hey, let's just make it to where like credit is cheap and easy to come by. But the reality here is this. One, the millennials are starting to get a little older, and they're not going to be consuming for much longer in the regards that, yeah, we have kids, but we're not going to be spending money like we are, 27 or 24, right? We're going to be spending money just trying to make sure that the kids are taken care of, looking for a lot more health insurance, looking for a lot more of, basic necessities, paying for the house. And while the economy will reflect that in particular ways, you're probably seeing a lot more you're actually going to see a lot more recessionary numbers in that. Hopefully, Americans can learn how to save a little bit, so maybe they can actually afford some of this shit. But also, when it comes down to it, is that you're probably going to need the Fed to get somewhere around 3% interest again, because you're going to need Gen X to actually be able to eke out a return, especially with the fact that if you're going to be having them as the primary tax crew, they're going to need some money to actually get taxed. Because the boomers aren't really making any money, and the primary generator of tax is income still. And so, yeah, it's going to be very interesting because the boomers are still going to have a lot of wealth, but not passed it on yet. There's a lot. What should happen? interest rates around 3%. We should actually expect a recession definitely towards the end of the decade. We can push it, but if things keep going the way they're going, it'll probably be rolling in and out. Very similar to what the Europeans were experiencing a decade ago, except we're seeing it now. Because while we're demographically more stable, is that our economy is kind of all over the damn place. And I'm not seeing a lot of the inflationary measures that should be under control actually get under control. Oil is kind of the first one that's kind of settling back in, but I've got a few questions to ask on that. Anyway, what's likely to happen? Politically, we're fucked for the next 2 years because I just don't see it where. Seriously, I don't see it where the Democrats and the Republicans are going to sing Kumbaya, and it's going to remind us a lot about particularly the last 2 years of the Obama administration in the regards that anything that can be put on the docket, whether it's Supreme Court justice, whether it is literally just basic bills, we could see it where the Congress literally just does another, oh, well, we can't pay the bills, so we're going to have another 8 weeks of, budgetary battles and, what did they call that? Where they shut down all the public buildings and shit.
The government shutdown?
Yeah. We'll probably see another one of that. Americans, get your shit together. I'm tired of even thinking about this. Like, y'all can do better than this, but you got to stop electing people like MTG and AOC. Like, you need people who actually understand math. And right now that is not happening. So until next time, I thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. My name's Ben Tiberius D, and I've been joined by CSP Cypher. You can check him out on Crowdsource Politics over there on YouTube and Twitch. He does a lot of good stuff over there. And of course, he's a good friend of ours as well. Nate Dallin, if you ever need an immigration lawyer out of Omaha, you can definitely check him out. Well, he's not really online, but he's definitely in person. He does that real work out there in the world. And so if you ever need somebody to really do that for you, definitely go give him a call. But without further ado, thank you for joining us for another episode of The Conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll catch you next time. Take care. And we're out.
All right, give me 1 second. Let me I'll wrap it up on my chat. I'm going to go ahead and mute Discord.
Sure.
I can figure it out. Definitely, right?
Wow, I had 12 people on my YouTube. Weird.
All right, everybody. That was the Tiberius. There we go. That was the Tiberius D conversations. I was so glad to have joined them on that program. I'm going to be doing it more often. We will be right back with finishing up the news roundup, but I want to give these guys the proper send off and everything like that. So be right back on that end. All right, everybody. Sorry about that, but we are back now. Greatly appreciate y'all sticking with us. So that was the Tiberius D conversations, which happened Thursdays, roughly about 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to try to do those most often because they're great, and Tiberius is a fantastic person, very, very knowledgeable when it comes to foreign policy. He's going to be joining us on the foreign policy front to talk about Cipher State with our next episode. So be sure to stay tuned for that. But we are going to continue on with the news roundup with some additional news coming out for you. So let's go ahead and get that back up here. I need to go back to this history. And... oh. Hold on a second. I needed my copy. Needed the copy. I got to the copy. Crap. Where'd it go? There it is. There it is. All right, so we're going to continue on with the news roundup. Now, let's go ahead and get into it. So we're going to continue on with some U.S. politics here, everybody. So prior to our little break for that conversation with Tiberius D, we finished up with Mar-a-Lago. Now we're going to continue on with U.S. politics. Starting off with Congress. So the U.S. Congress has been very busy with this week rounding up 2 months of legislative victories for Democrats and an embarrassing partisan display from Republicans. That partisan display from Republicans we talked about last week, and that was the PACT Act. To give a little bit of a brief recap of that, the PACT Act was structured in such a way to ensure that veterans that fought wars in Afghanistan and Iraq that were exposed to toxic chemicals from burn pit exposure got the health care that they need, the long-term health care. These individuals have like 10-20 times the rates of cancer than the general population, and a whole host of other issues, not just PTSD, but we're talking physical issues from those exposures. This was a very, very, very important thing to Jon Stewart, and Republicans were originally for it until they weren't. They voted against it because they were pissed off at Joe Manchin and Democrats pulling a fast one on them with the budget reconciliation bill, which we're going to talk about shortly. But they voted against it. But because of pressure from veteran groups and Jon Stewart leading the public charge of those veteran groups and the exposure of all the right-wing grifters therein, they came back and passed it on almost the same vote that they had it the first time. The bill didn't change anything. There was some language changed because the House had to originate spending. The Senate can't do that, so they were worried about that, so they changed a little bit of the language, but it was just a technicality. None of the underlining data or underlining numbers, the tax numbers, anything of that changed. So Republicans were just playing fuck games, and it lost on it. So that was what that is. Well, let's talk about the budget reconciliation bill and what it includes. So the biggest news coming out of Congress this week is the Senate vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which we did talk about briefly last week. That is a reconciliation bill that just a few months ago looked dead in the water. To the surprise of Senate Republicans, Senator Joe Manchin of Virginia last week announced that he and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York had reached a compromise reconciliation bill. After an overnight vote-a-rama process, the measure passed the Senate 51-50, with Vice President Kamala Harris breaking the tie. Now, this is the biggest action ever taken by Congress to combat climate change. The measure also empowers Medicare to negotiate drug prices, a longtime Democrat priority, and caps out-of-pocket spending for Medicare patients. Some Democrats were already running campaign ads on proposals included in the bill, and now they can point to the legislation as proof that they can deliver on those promises. The bill is expected to easily pass the House tomorrow, Friday, August, for anybody who might be listening to this afterwards, August 12th. So the legislation does the following: allows Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices. Now, this is probably the biggest thing that's going to impact the most people directly and indirectly. And the reason I say that is because Medicare is the price maker for prescription drugs. Why is Medicare the price maker? Because they are the biggest purchaser of drugs on the market. And so if you're the biggest purchaser and you can negotiate the price lower, everybody else is going to follow suit because they're not going to allow people to get one up on them, even if it's the US government. So this is going to lower drug cost across the board, at least for the drugs that Medicare will negotiate. There's some issues in there where they're only doing like 10 drugs at a time, stuff like that, but it is going to have real material impact on everybody, not just people that are on Medicare. Now, for people that are just on Medicare, it is capping out-of-pocket prescription drug cost for seniors. So the Medicare beneficiaries receive better financial protection by capping out-of-pocket costs for prescription drugs at $2,000 annually. Right now, people on Medicare can spend up, I've heard people spending $15,000 a year on drug prices. The government is going to pick up the rest of that tab, and out of pocket, they're going to only have to spend $2,000. So if you're one of those people that have a lot of prescription drugs, if a family member has to spend a lot on insulin or what have you, this is going to be directly impacting your finances in a beneficial way. Now, it also prevents higher healthcare costs. Health coverage will be more affordable for more than 10 million people because the Inflation Reduction Act extends the Enhanced Affordable Care Act marketplace subsidies through 2025. Prior to this legislation, that subsidy was going to expire at the beginning of next year or at the end of this year. It cracks down on big pharma greed by preventing drug companies from hiking prices above the rate of inflation. Again, drug prices have exceeded the rate of inflation a lot in the last 10 years, and we're going to say no more to that. Now, it also is going to cut down on carbon pollution dramatically. With this bill, emissions in 2030 are projected to be 40% below peak levels, putting our climate goal of cutting pollution to half of peak levels by the end of the decade within reach. But on that other end, while that people might think that is going to lead to increased prices for energy, the bill actually tackles that on the back end as well, and it's moving to lower energy cost. It does this by doing the following things. First off is that fossil fuels that drive inflation, but the bill is going to it's going to help families switch to cheaper electricity for home heating, cooking, and vehicles, helping Americans cut their utility bills and skip the gas station. Now, with that, people might say, oh, this is only going to impact people that can utilize those tax credits, and people that rent aren't going to experience it. No, people that rent are going to experience this too, because there is every incentive to rental units to also upgrade their appliances, even on the low end, because they're going to get the tax incentive, so it's going to be cheaper for them. And over the long run, replacing a refrigerator that's 10 years old is more cost effective, especially with a subsidy, than fixing it and delaying that for another 5 years. So that's going to improve people's lives as well. Now, the average household is expected to save $500, and even households that don't make the switch will see lower electricity and natural gas prices due to some of the things that are in the bill, such as increasing the amount of energy being brought online. Total spending in oil could go down by nearly 25% over the decade. This is an estimate based on the amount of energy production that's going to switch to greener energy. So we're talking wind, solar, hydropower, maybe some fuel cells, or electric cars. Also, it would provide middle and working class consumers with a tax credit for the purchase of cleaner vehicles that are made in North America, specifically made in America, which is Biden's like bring back made in America, bring back all these things. So not only will that help, families switch over to a cheaper electric car in terms of maintenance and gas prices, but it will also help generate jobs in the United States by providing subsidies that go towards American manufacturers. Now it also has created jobs, like I just said, through those subsidies. The bill also builds a new clean energy manufacturing economy by investing in refurbishing old factories, building new factories, requiring high wages, and mandating apprenticeship training for companies using clean energy tax credits. The bill will spur domestic production of batteries, solar panels, wind turbines, and more, setting the United States up to compete in the global clean energy economy and creating millions of clean energy jobs. Now, it also invests in communities that have suffered the most from environmental and health hazards. So communities who have experienced dangerous, long-standing environmental and health threats will have access to $3 billion in environmental and climate justice block grants to cut pollution and improve public health. In all, it will fund $60 billion worth of environmental justice priorities. Now, people might think that environmental justice is just a buzzword, communism by another name, what have you. Wrong. Okay? The reason why environmental justice is important is because we have communities that have been devastated by pollution and polluters and things of that nature, that the government has already come through, fined the company no longer is in business, but the damage remains there. You have people living on sites that are hazardous to their health, and the money that is designated for these initiatives are to clean up those areas, or absent the ability to clean them up to make them livable, help people move to other areas to avoid health hazards. That is going to be a huge boon on the economy in those local areas, and it's good that this is finally being tackled in a more systemic way. Now, this bill also cracks down on wealthy tax cheats. So the lack of adequate enforcement funding led to a massive drop in the rate of audited U.S. households earning $5 million or more per year, plummeting to just 2% in 2019 from a rate of over 16% in 2010. New funding in this bill will help enforce the tax code more fairly. Now, there's been a lot of talk online about the IRS going after middle class and lower income people. Some studies show that they do have, over the last 10 years or so, gone after more lower income people. Part of that reason is because of lack of funding to do complicated tax audits of people that make more money and have the ability to dodge taxes in more comprehensive ways. Now, the bill itself doesn't say and make any mention of hiring 87,000 new IRS agents. Even if it did, that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing, and it wouldn't necessarily mean coming after you. What it does mean is that the IRS has been gutted over the last 10, 15 years. It's been a cause du jour for Republicans to go after the IRS and defund it, starve the beast so it can't do its job properly. And, they don't like taxes anyways. They would rather the IRS doesn't exist, right? It's one of the top 4 abolish government agencies that's called into question, right? But when the IRS says it's going to hire more agents, it's not talking about door kickers. It is talking about everybody that works for the IRS. We're talking people that enforce tax compliance, which means accountants. We're talking about people that are agents on the phone. So when you have an issue with your taxes or you're having an issue with your refund, you call them. They're an IRS agent. That's what they're called. Okay. And you're talking about people that go after actual criminals, not just dodging taxes, but engaged in criminal enterprises under RICO statute. So we're talking FBI. We're talking we're talking mafia. We're talking about people like cartels, drug lords, those kind of people. The IRS helps deal with those people as well by doing complicated tax audits, tracking money being sent overseas through various number of ways of like LLCs and tax havens and the like, and coming down on those people to not only recover lost tax revenue, but also bring criminals to justice. So those are all the kind of people that are in the IRS. And not only that, a lot of IRS agents are on the older side, so they're going to have a lot of retirements, and those people need to be replaced with new agents. So that's what it does here. Now, furthermore, this bill fixes loopholes that allow wealthy corporations and Wall Street fund managers to avoid paying their fair share in taxes. The bill requires that every corporation with at least $1 billion worth of profits, so this is after expenses, raw profits, pay a minimum of 15% on their profits in taxes, so we will stop having large profitable companies that pay no taxes at all. This means that you can carry your losses for like 10 years, but you're going to pay some more. So there's people, these are things where this is what we're talking about on this file. Now, the bill originally was going to fix a loophole that allowed hedge fund managers to hide away some of their income inside investment instruments. But Cinema, being bought and paid for shill she is, got that removed. And that was replaced by a stock buyback surcharge. So if a company engages in stock buyback, they're going to have to pay a tax on that buyback. And that's going to probably tamp down on buybacks to a degree, but we'll see. Either way, that has been replaced, and there's going to be something more of that. And finally, the bill aims to cut inflation and drive down the deficit. It accomplishes this by decreasing demand through fairer taxes, increasing supply through investments in manufacturing clean energy, and cutting the cost of energy, healthcare, and prescription drugs. Unlike the $1.9 trillion 2017 Republican tax bill, the plan is actually fully paid for and will decrease the deficit by $300 billion on top of the $1.7 trillion deficit reduction already projected this year. Now, we do have a comment coming through from Maybe It Isn't Me saying that I am just engaged in Dem spin. The rich does not eat the rich. They will support themselves and hurt small people. Sad dude, you're a conservative at this point. No, dude, I'm not being conservative. So what this essentially boils down to is it's a difference of opinion about what the IRS is going to do. The IRS with this money isn't going to go after low-hanging fruit. One, it would be a marketing disaster for them to do so at this point. All eyes are on the IRS. If they go after the lower income people that are like avoiding paying $10,000 on under the table money, they're going to be looked at and scorned, and everybody's going to hate them. They're going to want to get some big wins straight off with this new hiring spree that they're going on. So they're going to go after people they're talking Bernie Madoffs of the world, right? People that have avoided taxes and have cheated people out of money. And that's what they're going to go after. And those taxes, the way that people hide that money from the IRS is very complicated. There seems to be this notion, especially among right-wing circles, that the IRS only needs one agent to go over one tax code, one tax file return. Absolutely not. That's not how simple taxes are for the very rich and powerful people. They go through, and the way that this is done is that it's essentially done in a kind of money laundering sort of way, where they take money from one business, filter it through another business, put it into a trust, put that trust into the Cayman Islands, Delaware, put it into the Sweden, what have you, Swiss bank, and then try to hide that money from the IRS by playing these games with moving it around and claiming different things on their taxes, right? It's what we saw from the Panama Papers, and it's what we saw from, there was another one released recently that I can't remember the name of, but that's what we see. And it takes a lot of processing to find these gimmicks because they're good at what they do. They pay people to hide this money, and they're very good at it. So it requires multiple agents to go over these tax returns to find the money laundering operations they're engaged in. Money laundering or tax avoidance, whichever, right? Money laundering is more FBI, tax evasion is more IRS. So that's what we're seeing from this here. And I'm honestly glad. I mean, this is a huge talking point that, IRS is going to come kick down your door. They're not going to do that. That's not what the IRS does. If a person has failed to pay their taxes, the majority of instances of that happening is a bill comes in the mail and it stipulates how you failed to pay your taxes. They'll even list it out for you. You made X amount of money, you paid X amount of money, you owe us X amount of money. You paid X amount of money, you made Y amount of money, you owe us Z back on the end. They're not going to come after people that are like $10 behind on their taxes. That'll just get applied to the next bill. We're talking thousands upon thousands of dollars here. So that's what's likely going to happen. Now we have another comment. Let me see what this one is really quick. Yeah. So we have Thomas D saying Janet Yellen has issued a directive for the IRS not to target middle-class payers. The frightened tax cheating Republicans had better be middle class. True. Thank you, Thomas, for that comment. So that's what we're going to be seeing here. And honestly, good. I don't know if you saw my little YouTube video. Actually, we'll put it up right now. All right. We're going to pull it up right now just because I think it's fun. And we're doing more shorts on YouTube. We're doing more shorts on YouTube, and I think they're fantastic. And, you know, we do a little trolling every once in a while over here. Do a little trolling. So let's play the short really quick. All right. So, boom. Boom. So according to Marco Rubio, Valdez is going to vote to add 87,000 new IRS. What happened? Web. Second monitor. There it goes. All right, we're going to reload. So according to Marco Rubio, Valdez is going to vote to add 87,000 new IRS agents, making the IRS bigger than the State Department, Defense Department, and Customs Border Patrol combined. You know what I say to that? Good. So according to Marco Rubio... Alright, so we do a little trolling here every once in a while, but honestly, pay your fucking taxes. They're not going to come after middle-class people, as we already said. They're coming after the bigger tax cheats, and that's a good thing. Now, continuing on with the copy, though, Senate Democrats were able to keep the out-of-pocket price for most insulin at $35 per month, but millions of diabetics will still pay more after Republicans amended the measure to exclude private insurers. After the Senate parliamentarian ruled that the cap didn't fit the rules of reconciliation, Republicans pushed to limit the cap to Medicare only. This amendment required the votes of 60 senators to overcome, and there were only 7 Republican votes. Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson summed up his refusal to vote for the amendment, saying, quote, "In reality, the Dems wanted to break Senate rules to pass insulin pricing cap instead of going through regular order. They put this in a bill it wasn't allowed in, all for show," he tweeted on Sunday. Complaints about Senate procedure are unlikely to sit well with Americans who must use insulin to treat diabetes. A Yale University study found that 14% of insulin users spend 40% or more of their income on insulin. And insulin prices in the United States have skyrocketed in the past decades, while other countries' prices remained stable. A study conducted by the RAND Corporation in 2018 found that the average cost of insulin per unit in the United States was $98.70, compared to just $12 in Canada and only $7.52 in the United Kingdom. Now, in other news from Congress, though, we have another bipartisan win on the horizon. So a bipartisan coalition of lawmakers in both chambers has introduced legislation to give a pathway to citizenship to tens of thousands of Afghan evacuees. The Afghan Adjustment Act would allow Afghans with temporary humanitarian status to apply for permanent legal residencies in the United States, rather than through the asylum system or special immigrant visa program. The legislation would also broaden eligibility for the special immigrant visas, which is designed for allies who aided the United States military operations in the country. More than 76,000 Afghans were evacuated to the United States after the withdrawal late last year, mainly using the humanitarian parole process, which is supposed to be used on a case-by-case basis for urgent humanitarian or significant public benefit reasons. The bill will likely face resistance from some Republicans and immigration hawks who object to the number of Afghans coming to the United States, some of whom do not have any connection with American military operations in the country and have also raised concern about vetting and security. All in all, though, for a Congress known mostly for inaction over the last decade or more, the Democrats have a much to go about going into the midterm elections. And they do. But as we said in the little segment that we're going to have another episode of, another publication out of this, Democrats are still likely to lose in midterms. At least one is going to pass, but it all depends on what happens in the next 2 or 3 months. August, September, October, 2 months. Next 2 months, there might be some surprises. There might be some good wins. We will see, and when we see, we will let you all know, and you can come to this program specifically to get updates therein. So let's continue on with some news items and some news bites, and we have some interesting news coming out of here. And part of that interesting news is capitalism run amok among streaming giants. and franchise fees in Texas. So why did I say capitalism run amok? Because a lawsuit filed Thursday by 25 Texas cities claims that Disney, Hulu, and Netflix have for years stiffed the cities out of dollars the streaming giants are required to pay under state law. Austin, Houston, Dallas, and Fort Worth are among the cities that sued the streaming service in Dallas County to recover money they say have been owed since 2007 and to require the service to pay each year going forward. Under state law, the services have to pay cities a franchise fee, which traditional cable providers also pay, in exchange for using communication lines over public rights of way to transmit their services into homes. As more people abandon cable subscriptions in favor of streaming services, cities have lost franchise fee revenue, money that goes to fund city services like police and fire protection, as well as roads, parks, and libraries. Cities haven't made up for that revenue with fees from streaming services, said Stephen Wollens, a former Texas lawmaker and lead attorney for the cities. So even though the state law classifies them as video service providers that must pay the fees, the major streamers haven't paid cities a dime, Wollens says. Quote, "They should have been paying this fee from the very beginning. Shame on them because they are using the public right-of-way that every other company pays the city to use." The cities are seeking funds dating to when the services launched. Netflix in 2007, Hulu in 2008, and Disney Plus, the Walt Disney Company, streaming since in service in late 2019. Their subscriber base numbers in the tens of millions worldwide, with Netflix on the top with more than 220 million subscribers. The effort by Texas cities is not new. There are similar pending lawsuits in several states across the country, including Georgia, Indiana, Ohio, Nevada, and Tennessee, dating back as far as 2018. According to ARS Technica, the lawsuits are based on an unusual legal argument and don't seem likely to succeed, though. Essentially, the cities are claiming that Netflix and similar providers use the public right-of-way simply by offering video streaming services over the internet. At the heart of the franchise fee burden is the notion that cable operators pay municipalities in order to have the right to festoon their jurisdictions with wires. Streaming companies say their services don't fall under the same rules as cable companies because they don't have infrastructure like fiber optic cables or other wireline facilities. Quote, "These cases falsely seek to treat streaming services as if they were cable and internet access providers, which they aren't," a Netflix spokesman told The Verge. Continuing on, they said, "They also threatened to place a tax on consumers that the legislature never intended, and we are confident that the courts will conclude that these cases are meritless." The Tennessee Supreme Court heard oral arguments in May of this year, and a decision is expected during the court's fall term, which begins in September. The outcome of that case will likely decide the fate of lawsuits filed around the country. As those happen, we will keep you updated. Now, in some very bad news coming out of Facebook, the boomer book, is that we have Facebook complying with state subpoenas, warrants around abortion, and charges pending against a teenager. So this is very bad. It makes sense that they would do this, but it goes to show that there are over ramifications of what the getting rid of Roe means for people in the everyday. So let's talk about it. Now, Forbes have reported that a Nebraska teenager is facing criminal charges alleging she aborted a fetus in violation of state law after authorities obtained her Facebook messages using a search warrant. 17-year-old Khalees Burgess, who is being tried as an adult along with her mother, Jessica Burgess, is awaiting trial in Madison County District Court on charges that he broke a Nebraska law banning abortions after 20 weeks. This marks one of the first instances of a person's Facebook activity being used to incriminate her in a state where abortion access is restricted, a scenario that has remained largely hypothetical in the weeks following the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Nebraska currently outlaws abortions beyond 20 weeks. On Monday, Republican lawmakers in the state filed to secure enough votes to decrease that window to 12 weeks. Celeste and her mother were charged in July with allegedly removing, concealing, or abandoning a dead human body and concealing the death of another person after Norfolk Police Department received a tip claiming that Celeste had miscarried in April at 23 weeks of pregnancy and secretly buried the fetus with her mother's help. While Celeste told police that she had suffered a miscarriage, they continued to investigate, serving Facebook with a search warrant to access Celeste and Jessica's Facebook accounts. They subsequently found messages between the mother and daughter, allegedly detailing how Celeste had undergone a self-managed abortion with Jessica's help. There are 4 states that ban abortion at 24 weeks, and more than a dozen that broadly ban it at the start of fetal viability. After this story's publication, Meta spokesman Andy Stone said in a statement on Twitter that, quote, "Nothing in the valid warrants we received from local law enforcement in early June prior to the Supreme Court decision mentioned abortion. The warrants concerned charges related to criminal investigation, and court documents indicated to police at the time were investigating a case of a stillborn baby who was burned and buried, not a decision to have an abortion." Stone added that Meta was prohibited from sharing information about search warrants by non-disclosure orders, which have since been lifted. Now, it should be noted that nowhere on here had they mentioned that they would not comply with search warrants such as these, and Facebook broadly has complied with duly administered search warrants for a whole number of crimes. And this just goes to show the ramifications of overturning Roe. Continuing on, a month before Celeste was charged, Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook's parent company Meta, was asked by employees how the company will protect those seeking abortions. Zuckerberg replied that the efforts to expand encryption across the platform will keep people safe, Cyberscoop reported. In May, Meta's VP of HR, Janelle Gale, told employees they were not allowed to discuss abortion at work, according to The Verge. The company later announced that it will reimburse employees who find they must travel to a different state to seek an abortion. Still, Meta has remained largely silent on how it will moderate abortion content in general. However, users recently noticed that Instagram and Facebook posts about acquiring abortion pills, such as mifepristone, were being systemically removed. At the time, Meta continued to earn revenue from anti-abortion advertisement containing dangerous misinformation, Media Matters found. Now, part of the reason why Facebook is probably going along with this is because those pills in some states are illegal. And so they don't want to run afoul of the law in those states and get sued and go into a legal ramifications dispute with a state. It's going to be very expensive to them, even if they ultimately win it. So that's why they're complying with all this, because at the end of the day, Facebook is a company and it wants to make money and keep business. So it's a very, they got to balance these things out in their interest, which is making money, but also keeping customers on the platform. So they're going to do things like this. Continuing on, though, an investigation by The Markup discovered that Facebook was collecting data from users interacting with abortion services websites and subsequently made that information available to anti-abortion groups as well through its data sharing programs. In response to pressure from employees, Google announced that it would delete location data of users who had used the platform to look up abortion services. All of the largest tech giants have been pressed on whether and to what extent they may cooperate in investigations that seek to punish women for seeking an abortion. In June, Meta spokesman Andy Stone told the Washington Post that the company carefully scrutinizes all government requests for users' information and often pushes back, including in court. Anyone who has seen The Handmaid's Tale, though, knows what it is like. Now, what does this mean? Well, if we can give one small piece of advice over at Crowdsource Politics, it is to stop using Messenger for talking about anything like this at all. Go to a different messaging app that has end-to-end encryption. End-to-end encryption means that the company itself is not able to access those records and therefore cannot comply with a subpoena by the state government, because that is how their business is structured. That's how their messaging service is structured. So that you can go to platforms such as Telegram, such as Signal, and a host of other messaging programs. I think Apple's internal text messaging service is end-to-end encrypted as well. But look up what is best for you and start utilizing those messaging programs instead. And that is what we're going to say about that. Continuing on with the news roundup, we're going to get into the U.S. economy, and we have big news on the inflation front. So there is finally, as we've been saying on this program for a long time, since February, March, that inflation is going to see a decrease in numbers that are noticeable for people starting around July, and that is what we have seen. Prices at the wholesale level fell from June to July, the first month-to-month drop in more than 2 years, and a sign that some of the U.S. economy's inflationary pressures cooled last month. Today's report from the Labor Department showed that the Producers' Price Index, which measures inflation before it reaches consumers, declined 0.5% in July. That means it went negative from June to July. It was the first monthly drop since April of 2020 and was down from a sharp 1% increase from May to June. The easing of wholesale inflation suggests that consumers could get some relief from relentless inflation in the coming months. U.S. consumer prices were unchanged in July due to a sharp drop in the cost of gasoline, delivering the first notable sign of relief for wary Americans who have watched inflation climb over the past 2 years. More importantly, core inflation, which does not count price increases in the particularly volatile category of energy and food, held constant at 5.9% annually and was only up 0.3% compared to last month, continuing its downward trend since March. That's pretty much in line with the month-to-month changes in core inflation that happen under more normal economic circumstances when annual inflation is closer to 2 to 3%. As a result, there's a sense the new numbers could be pointing to a change, even if it's not enough information yet to be more hopeful. Quote, "We are at a major turning point in terms of inflation," said Brian Bethune, an economist at Boston College, who in an interview with The Hill called the figures a good sign. And Wharton professor Jeremy Siegel told CNBC, quote, Forward-looking inflation to me looks good, and it looks like the Fed can be more moderate," adding that although more rate hikes would be necessary, it wouldn't require as aggressive a response from the central bank as some have been expecting. Like we said, these are great numbers. Inflation's down, gas prices are down. Gas prices are down immensely, and they're continuing to drop. We have the ninth consecutive week of gas prices dropping here in Texas, in my local area. There are some gas stations that even are selling below $3 a gallon. Average prices in Texas usually, I thought, were a bellwether to the rest of the country, but it seems what actually happens is that Texas is one of the first states to see in prices fall, but one of the last states to see them rise. So there's one of those weird situations here going on, right? So yeah, it's pretty good news. We have great news for Democrats, great news for consumers, more importantly for everyday working Americans, that increase of inflation, massive drop in the increase, massive deceleration of inflation, going from 9.1% to 8.5%, a 0.6% drop from the previous month, which means we should see prices continue to go down, especially with core trending in general inflation prices. And like I said, this is some good news at the gas pump as well. Gas prices are below $4 a gallon for the first time since March, though the market remains precarious, and experts said it's too early to know if the move lower will hold. The national average for gallon of gas has fallen for 58 straight sessions, according to the AAA, and is now at $3.99 per gallon. A fall from June, when prices topped out at about $5 a gallon, has been fast. Prices at the pump have declined for a number of reasons. First up, in the commodity market, there's a common saying that the cure for high prices is high prices, and that may be proving to be true. In other words, high prices bring down demand, which bring down prices. Some driving is necessary to get to work, for example. But with prices as at record levels, consumers might decide not to take a road trip or carpool with friends rather than driving solo. We've seen this show up in government consumption figures, which have shown a drop-off in demand. Some states have also suspended their gas taxes, which artificially pushes prices lower. And the main reason for the fall is the decline, but the main reason for that decline in gas prices, though, is the decline in oil prices. Crude is the single largest influencing gas prices, accounting for more than 50% of what we pay at the pump. West Texas Intermediate crude, the U.S. oil benchmark, shot above $130 per barrel in March after Russia invaded Ukraine, sending global energy prices reeling. It was the first time West Texas Intermediate crude traded at the level since 2008. But since then, oil prices have retreated, with gasoline prices following suit, albeit at a slower pace. Today, West Texas Intermediate crude traded at $93.51 a barrel. WTI traded at $93.51 a barrel. That is a drop off of just shy of $40 a barrel since its peak. In recent weeks, glowing recession fears have sent prices tumbling. Oil is vulnerable to any perceived softness in the global economy. And since slowdowns typically lead to lower demand for oil and petroleum products, the move below $4 begs the question of whether further declines are on the horizon. Experts say the relief may be short-lived. For one, WTI is far below its March peak. It has jumped more than 5% over the last week. And gasoline futures, while also well below their recent highs, are up 10% over the last week. So sending mixed signals here. The streak of daily declines in the retail price of gasoline is about to end, as crude prices and refined products futures have rallied off their recent lows, said Andy Lepau, president of Lepau Oil Associates. The global energy market remains on edge, though, and there are a number of factors that could push prices higher in the coming months. Refiners are running full out to keep pace with demand. A hurricane or another event that brings refinery outages could push up gasoline prices, since there aren't alternatives readily available, as Europe also looks for petroleum products. Additionally, the full state of the European sanctions against Russia fuel purchases has yet to go into effect. The country is a major energy producer, and so the EU stumbling to secure supplies from elsewhere could lift prices. But with that said, Russia is selling prices below market value as much as 30%. And since they're upping production to make up for the loss in revenue, since they have to sell people at a loss, that's bringing more oil online than what had been done previously. So it could be a wash. And this is all against a backdrop of high demand. The International Energy Agency said today that it now sees 2022 demand growth of 2.1 million barrels per day, which is 380,000 barrels per day higher than the prior forecast. Patrick Dehaan, head of petroleum analysis at GasBuddy, said in a Thursday tweet that the drop in prices may stall over the next 5 to 10 days, but he added that the fall could be short term. The decline for gas prices has been swift, but they're still 81 cents per gallon. They're still 81 cents per gallon more than what consumers paid last year. The rapid ascent has been a major driver for inflation, since energy prices are a driving force in many categories. If food prices cost more to transport because of higher prices, for example, then food prices will increase as well. Inflation is currently running around its hottest level in the last 40 years. The latest CPI report did show that price pressures are easing a bit, in part because of falling energy prices and supply chains readjusting. In July, energy prices overall dropped 4.6% month over month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics said on Wednesday. Gasoline prices fell by 7.7%. This is just 1 month snapshot, and with global energy markets still tight and very, very tight, the relief at the pump could ultimately prove temporary, though. But demand falls in the summer anyways, after the summer anyways, as people stop their summer vacations and stay more indoors. So maybe it'll be a wash. I personally think, despite all this news that we're saying, that gas prices will probably continue to fall for a little bit. But I don't think they're going to go back up. I think they're going to level off here. And we might be to a new quote unquote normal gas price of around $3.20 a barrel, a gallon or so. But we don't know. And as I said, this is a 1 month does not a trend make. So we need to see what happens next month and the month after and the month after to know where we're really at. But right now, things are looking good, and you have to tout the good news. And that's especially true with the job market. And that's what we're going to talk about next. And this is one of those situations where we just have to talk about it. We have to have good news about this. And that is that defying anxiety about a possible recession and raging inflation, America's employers added a stunning 528,000 jobs last month. Last Friday's report showed that all the jobs lost in the coronavirus-induced recession have been restored. Unemployment fell to 3.5%, the lowest rate since the pandemic struck in early 2020. July's job creation was 130,000 more than the number produced in June, and the most since February. Friday's job numbers from the Labor Department arrive amid a growing consensus that the U.S. economy is losing momentum, which is kind of bonkers. The American economy shrank in the first 2 quarters of 2022, but those numbers are not necessarily final, as the first number, as the last quarter's numbers are going to be adjusted as more data comes in, and that's going to happen this month. But this has been an informal definition of a recession. But most economists believe the strong job market has kept the economy from slipping into a downturn. And if it is a recession, it's one of the most mild recessions we've ever experienced. With that, Brian Colton has been quoted saying, "Recession? What recession?" And he's a chief economist at Fitch Ratings, wrote about the numbers that came out. He continued on saying the U.S. economy is creating new jobs at an annualized rate of 6 million. That's 3 times faster than what we normally see historically in a good year. Economists had actually expected to see half those jobs created. We're expecting to see only 250,000 jobs last month, and that got blown out of the water. Quote, "The strength of the labor market is in the face of rate tightening from the Fed. The strength of the labor market in the face of rate tightening from the Fed already this year clearly shows that the Fed has more work to do," said Charlie Ripley, senior investment strategist at Allen's Investment Management. Continuing on, he said, "Overall, this report should put the notion of a near-term recession on the back burner, at least for now." So that's what we want to say about the U.S. economy. And as we like to do with our news roundup, we like to close out the news roundup with some news of the weird. And this one is a little gross, little bit of something about happening on your body, my body, everyone's body. It's a little bit disgusting, but it's interesting. We're going to talk about it. And it's called, there's mites, bugs, reproducing on your face? What is this? Well, this story comes from the New York Post about a creature that may be having sex on your face. Thought bed bugs were revolting? Well, these microscopic, quote-unquote, nipple mites make whoopee on people's faces may soon become one with humans, according to a skin-crawling study published in the Journal of Molecular Biology and Evolution. Quote, "Changes to their DNA have resulted in some unusual body features and behaviors," study co-author Alejandra Pretori of the UK's University of Reading said of the discovery. Pretori said was referring to a ubiquitous skin parasite which resides in hair follicles on people's faces and nipples and subsists on the oil released from our pores. And we're going to go over to this mite now. This thing here. This thing is what we're talking about. See this? That's an artist rendition, but we're talking about this thing. All right? In what wasn't revolting enough, these 0.3 millimeter long skin tropals even mate on faces during the night. However, it appears that these follicular freeloaders' lovemaking habits have had terrible consequences. After analyzing their gene sequence, scientists found that they are merging with humans and may soon reside permanently within us. Quote, "We found these mites have a different arrangement of body part genes to other similar species due to them adapting to a sheltered life inside our pores," Secretary of the sex-induced interspecies splicing. Potentially becoming one with humans isn't the only side effect of this gene reduction. For one, the mites are exclusively nocturnal as they lack UV protection, as well as the gene that causes animals to be awakened by daylight. They also can't produce melatonin, a compound that regulates sleep in small invertebrates, but are able to power their facial sexy time sessions by harvesting the substance from their human host. So that is what we're talking about here. It's kind of gross. It's kind of interesting. It is part of the human experience, and that's why we wanted to share with you. However, with that, I am sad to say that we are out of time. Now, we know you liked what you heard because you stayed with us to the end, so go ahead and smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. If this is the first time you've tuned in, we do this every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, bringing the news that was for the last week with the kind of analysis only a crowd can provide. So we want to thank you, the viewers, for tuning into us, because without you, we would just be a couple of people shouting to the void of the internet, and this makes everything worthwhile. We'll also like to say special thanks to our Facebook community, who provides some of the topics that we cover in the news program. If you have anything you would like to keep us up, you should join our Discord. Join our Discord. We're going to have contests there. You should join us. You should hit us up on Twitter at crowdsourcedpoll on Twitter, and join the Facebook community at Facebook/groups/Tribune Commons or /comments. And yeah, so that's everything. So thank you all again so much for joining us. And as we say at Crowdsourced Politics, keep your head up through the political storm.